Mayor, you have your words?
I do. I'm ready when we are. All right. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Saturday, February 27th budget session. This is session 2 of 3. We'll now salute the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Pursuant to Section 5, Chapter 231 Public Laws of 1975, this is the state for the record that adequate notice of this meeting has been provided to the public by posting and maintaining the annual notice of regular meetings on the bulletin board of the municipal building, by mailing annual notice of regular meetings for 2021 to the news record and Star Ledger December 2020, and by filing said notice in the office of the Township Clerk.
Mr. Adams?
Here.
Mr. Daffis? Mr. DeLuca?
Here.
Mr. Lembrick?
Here.
Mayor McGehee?
Here.
Whereas Chapter 231 Public Laws of 1975, commonly known as the Open Public Meetings Act, requires that all meetings of public bodies be open to the public. And whereas Section 7A provides that the governing body has a discretion to permit, prohibit, or regulate the active participation of the public at any meeting, and whereas our desire of the governing body to comply with the provision of this act, same time to conduct its business in an orderly and expeditious manner, now therefore be resolved by the Township Committee, Township Maplewood does hereby prohibit, except as set forth in the formal agenda, active participation in the deliberations of the governing body by the public, and except as otherwise prescribed by law, does limit the public to the observations of the actions and discussions of the governing body at all of its regular and special meetings.
So moved.
Second.
Ms. Adams?
Yes.
Mr. Daffis?
Yes.
Mr. DeLuca?
Yes.
Mr. Lembrick?
Yes.
Mayor McGehee?
Yes. Thank you, Ms. Fritzen, and good morning, everyone. I will now briefly go through our agenda for this morning. We will have a total of 9 discussions or hearings. We will start with our health department. We will move on to community service. We'll have administration and then finance. We'll take about a 10-minute break and then we'll reconvene and have our clerk and township committee, open space trust fund, our SIDS, Maplewood Village Alliance and Springfield Avenue partnership. Then we'll hear from YouthNet and then finally the Community Coalition on Race. Our goal is to be done by 1 o'clock, but we will see how it goes. Just like last week and any other public sessions, we will hear a narrative from our department heads regarding the highlights of 2020. We'll ask them to highlight 3 key goals for 2021. Then we'll go into their operating expenses. And then we'll also look at their capital. And then regarding personnel, we will only talk about new positions. We will not talk about merit increases. We will do that in a closed session. After last week, we made some good progress in terms of assessing where our operating expenses are, but we're not anywhere near where we need to be. We haven't really broken the seal, if you will, of getting under that 8.3, 8.4%. So we still have a lot of work ahead. We're gonna have to start really digging in and starting to look at some cuts here so we can minimize or lower that current 8.4%. So just be thoughtful of that as we continue. You see line items that you think we should really address, we should address them sooner than later to help Mr. Kaloje, Mr. Schuster, and Mr. Jimes, as well as the Finance Committee as we start to get to a lower number than our ceiling of 8.4%. So with that, I'd like to yield the floor to my colleagues who would like to say any words, and then after that, we will begin our session. The floor is open. All right. Hearing none, I will yield the floor to our health officer, Ms. Davenport. Good morning.
Good morning, everyone. Let me begin by saying thank you so much for reviewing the budget. The program budget narratives were included in the packet, but essentially our key goals for, well, let me overview 2020. Our main focus was the global pandemic and addressing that. Since then, we have increased our capacity through the Strengthening Local Capacity Grant through the federal and state government. So we've increased our ability to respond to COVID and its social services. And we were able to still complete all of our inspections that we needed to do that are under the auspices of the health department. So that's been really crucial. As for our key goals for 2021, it will always and still be until the COVID pandemic is under control and hopefully over, is to continue to be the lead on the response and recovery, pushing testing, making sure access to vaccinations is possible until all of our residents have gotten the COVID vaccination. And then to usher a new time period when there is no COVID. But also to maintain and sustain still our daily activities that we were responsible for as the health department, both public health wise and environmental health wise. And then to hopefully increase and continue to push public health promotion and education throughout our community on various topics and issues that still exist even with COVID.
Thank you, Ms. Davenport. Any questions for Ms. Davenport from her narrative?
Mayor, I just want to bring something to light. It doesn't really affect the budget presentation. It's more of a policy thing that we on the TC and the administrators with us this morning need to keep in mind. So you may have noticed in your review of the Department of Health narrative, and you'll notice, and you may have noticed in reviewing the master budget spreadsheet, that even though the administrator Viveros recommended and we adopted a reorganization that the result of which was that we pulled out the Department of Health out of community services. When we did so, and this org chart is in Ms. Davenport's narrative, it came with it the social services coordinator. Remember, our social services coordinator is what we used to refer to as welfare. In other words, Miss Ashman, Beverly Ashman. Yep, it's right there. So you're not going to see in the operating expenses for the budget. So, okay, so let me back up. So we did that. And because we adopted this recommendation in November, late November last year, we introduced a resolution reclassifying our employees, which includes social services welfare under the Department of Health. However, in January of this year, when we adopted our ordinance defining the Department of Health, we did not do that. So it's not consistent. So you're going to not see, even though this is part of the Department of Health presentation, you're not going to see in the budget the social services operating. That's going to be part of community services, but we need to address this down the road. That's all. In case that creates any confusion, that explains it. I don't know if anybody knows that other than me. Does that make sense? Does anyone have questions about that?
Any questions for Mr. Daffis?
Ms. Davenport, did you want to add anything to it?
No, that's correct. So my apologies. I did not edit the budget narrative, the program goals and the narrative, because I thought it didn't apply. But yes, Mr. Daffis is correct. So that position reverts back to its original place in the Department of Community Services. So please don't look at that part. Thank you.
So how are we correcting this?
I think we need to go back and excuse me, just swallowed weirdly. I think we need to go back and edit our ordinance that defines the Department of Health. If we agree with the classification, because I think we do, to make it the Department of Health and Human Services.
Okay.
Or could we just leave it as Department of Health, Mr. Daffis, and then just assume the org chart as it is?
Sure,
We
we
could
could
do
do
that.
that too. We could discuss that with Mr. Desiderio at a forthcoming TC. I could bring it up for discussion.
Okay, so that would mean that Ms. Ashman, that social services director position will go to the health department then.
Right, if
Okay.
that, yep.
Can we put this on the Board of Health agenda and just vote it up and authorize Mr. Desiderio to make the changes?
That's exactly what I was thinking. This is due on Tuesday. And then Mr. Schuster, take note, please, and Mr. Jimes.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at operating expenses. All right, I have your spreadsheet up. I'm sharing it now. I believe I'm sharing. Am I sharing the right one? I don't know anymore. Yeah, I am. Good.
Yes.
Okay. Awesome.
Yes.
So as discussed, we don't discuss salary and wages, so I kind of graded that out. But we're looking at your requests versus the assessment by Mr. Schuster. And then we're looking at an actual budget to actual for 2020. And we're looking at requested versus actual for 2020 to see what difference or variance there might be. The only question I had was obviously, there was no real true line item for COVID last year, but obviously there was some spend associated. Taking into account that COVID is still here and will be here at least for the first 3 quarters of 2021, where are COVID expenses now being absorbed in your budget for 2021?
So we have the vulnerable populations grant, the strengthening local capacity grant. So we are able to put some of our COVID needs and resources expenses into that. But as mentioned before, that's a 6-month grant with potential for extension into another year. I foresee that we can use that. I'm not sure if Mr. Kolodziej can speak to or Mr. Schuster on where potentially the FEMA grant or Mr. DeLuca, if FEMA is also continuing funding, but that was an area where we were able to provide for expenses, but I'm not sure if they extended it for 2021.
So from, if I may, Mayor, from a technical perspective, Candace is absolutely correct. We know that we have a $142,000 grant, which we set up as a revenue item. And it's also set up as an appropriation item. Anything from her department that is related to that grant or COVID would get charged to that specific line item because we need to send down documentation that proves that we're spending the money. And so it's just easier to separate it from a regular operating budget. In terms of the FEMA expenses, which are typically reimbursable expenses, we would wind up putting it into the health department budget, which will make it run hot. But as we get awarded the grant, we would do the same thing and run a Chapter 159 to set up the revenue, set up the appropriation, and then we would reclassify any of those expenditures that are coming from the health department, and we would move them into the grant when the time comes. But as it stands right now, we don't have an award letter from FEMA, so it's not set up in our budget yet.
Right. So the VPOC grant for now can sustain us until we get word about the FEMA funding.
Okay, I got it. Any additional questions?
I have a question, and hopefully it relates to flu shots. And Ms. Davenport, did you want to add a little bit something here? There's a recommendation to reduce this budget, and I know that, and I understand that because of our conversations as your Board of Health chair, but can you elaborate further for the rest of my teammates here and for the public? Historically, we've seen a downward trend in folks taking advantage of our township sponsored flu shots. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Thank you for bringing that one up. There's actually 2 things that I'll bring up, and one of them was the flu shots. So as Mr. Daffis mentioned, historically, we have been offering flu shots at the township, both for our employees and for the general public. But over time, because it's been offered at, CVS's, Targets, Walgreens, and at people's doctor's offices, there's less and less interest to come out to town hall to get it. In fact, there's a lack of interest or less of an interest among our township employees and just the general public. So my proposal is to decrease the amount of flu shots that we order. We usually order 200, but we never hit that mark. So we always have to return some and decrease that to potentially 100. And then the other funding would be to pay Dr. Grover to assist us with the vaccine administration.
Thank you, Ms. Davenport and Mr. Daffis. Yeah, I saw that. I thought it was, I appreciate that you said reducing and looking at your, I'm looking for more department heads to do exactly what you just did right there, right? Like look at your operating, expenses and be really thoughtful and realistic. And, 2,500 is 2,500. I even put 2K when I was doing my assessment. We'll get there later, but that's great and understood. Any additional questions for Ms. Davenport regarding operating expenses? I had one I highlighted, which is probably more of a question for Mr. Kaloje and Mr. Schuster than you, Ms. Davenport, and that is, I see this line item popping up all the time, the software licensing, or maybe Mr. Michalowski can answer it as well, but obviously that's a big portion of your budget, and it's significant. So what's the story behind that? Is that we're spreading out our software licensing across all departments, or what's the story here?
I'm sure. Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Michalowski.
Sure. I'll let Joe back, come in and add anything. But I think last year when they implemented SDL for the dog licensing, there was some one-time costs for the implementation and training. And this probably reflects now just the operating costs to maintain the license now that that one-time expenditure has happened.
So so this is, okay, gotcha. This is a $9,000 to maintain the licensing. Okay. We should look at that. Maybe we can negotiate that one. It seems high to me for licensing, but
so we use that for SDL. We use SDL for our dog and cat licensing, but we are also looking to explore. And again, this is one of the things with the daily activities, the health department that we do want to get to, is see if we can make all of our licensing automated. Currently, aside from dog and cat licensing, everything is still paper applications. But we would like to use SDL, and I do believe that it's within their capability to assist us in making everything green and online. So that'd be great. And I think it's included. It's not an additional fee. So that's something to look forward to for 2021. The one other thing that I wanted to bring up to your attention is the summer meals program. So that is in coordination with the Township of Irvington. This would be our third year going into it. But the Board of Ed has traditionally provided us with the funding of $8,000 to $10,000. But with everything going on in the Board of Ed, I don't know if we will have that guarantee for 2021. I have yet to reach out to Mr. Roth, and I know that he is departing the school district. So I can see how much, or if they have it in their budget to put it in, but I just want to put it out there to the township that we may have to add to that, expense or pay for that. And if that's something you'd be willing to do.
So we'd have to incur incremental costs based on the Board of Ed. Yeah, let's circle back with the Board of Ed and thank you in advance for that, Ms. Davenport, and see where they are with Dr. Taylor, Mr. Roth. I would hope that that's something they would continue. And then working with Mr. Daffis is keep us, up to date and up to speed. Maybe we discuss it at the Board of Health meeting in April.
Okay, will do. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. I don't think you had any capital from my the documents I was looking at. Glenn, is that incorrect? And if so, please feel free to start to share your screen.
Yep, no capital here.
Cool. All right. Well, with that being said, and I know we don't have any new personnel. Before we let you go to enjoy your rainy Saturday, Ms. Davenport, any final remarks for the committee?
No, I think we're good. We're running smoothly. We are a tight, efficient ship. And we do have a lot of responsibilities. We're across the board. Public health is in all policies, but we are doing our best to maintain everything and excel in bringing good public health services to the Township of Maplewood.
Well, thank you, Ms. Davenport, for your service. I think I speak for everyone. I say that your leadership in our community and your team has been phenomenal to help us during this pandemic. And, it's, your thoughtfulness in everything that we do has played an instrumental role. So thank you, and thank you again.
And thank you to all the Township Committee and our Board of Health Chair. I do appreciate all of your support and guidance over the last year, which was a really phenomenal, crazy year. One none of us expected, but I think we're going to make it through with flying colors. I do.
Thank you, Ms. Davenport. Have a great Saturday. We'll speak soon. All right, we'll now move on to community service. Is Ms. Mancuso with us? There she is. Good morning, Ms. Mancuso. How are you?
Good morning.
Good, good. So as we traditionally do, we're going to listen to your 2020 narrative and then listen to your three key goals for 2021. Then we'll review your operating expenses and ask questions if there are any. And then we'll look at your capital requests. I had 2 capital requests, and if there are 3, Glenn, heads up, I need the third one. And then if we have any personnel, which I didn't see for new positions, then we would do that. So without further ado, I'll yield the floor to you, and thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. The Department of Community Service has had a busy time during the 2020 pandemic. Our team was basically challenged, like others, to provide safe programming whenever possible, falling within the ever-changing executive orders that either were or were not released as the year went on. And we had to train and obtain staff accordingly. We are proud to say we're one of the only towns that offered residents both a pool and a camp during this summer season. We wanted to keep residents of all ages active physically and mentally during these unprecedented times. So we're really proud of that. We're just coming out of a statewide conference and learning that we were kind of an industry leader in keeping everybody engaged, people, of course, of all ages, including our seniors and our arts and culture groups as well. As far as our department staffing goes, we have myself, the director, program supervisors of senior services, manager of recreation, director of arts and culture. We have an arts director that's been very busy over the past year, facilities managers, pool maintenance foremen, and a lot of part-time staff, which includes our tennis staff, front desk staff at the pool patio, camp directors, and park attendants. So some of our facilities, just as an overview, include the DeHart Community Center, the Maplewood Community Pool, the Woodlands, the 1978, the Bergdorf Center for Performing Arts, and the Maplewood Senior Center. So some of those spaces were not open to the public during 2020, but we've been keeping everybody mostly outside, which is kind of the theme, and it seems like it again, get outside with Maplewood Community Services. So our parks include Borden, DeHart, Maple Crest, Memorial Park, Orchard Park, and Walter Park. And I will say, being in this industry, the parks and fields have become a really popular place to be, which is great because we've always thought and known they were a community asset, and to see people outside where they can, be spaced safely apart. And we really were not focusing on screen time and virtual programming as, a lot of other towns do. I was really focused on getting outside and getting moving. So even if they were small groups, it was definitely always working in tandem with the health department and current guidelines. A lot of them had to be created by us because we just couldn't wait or they didn't exist. And our public spaces and our indoor facilities were a huge asset to be able to keep people we had to pivot, and I think we successfully did that. I never thought I'd be playing bingo with senior citizens in a parking lot behind the senior center. But they came out, they appreciated it. So we had a lot of recreation program in 2020. We were able to safely execute sports also, not contact sports, and of course within guidelines, but just to list a few things, we were able in 2020 to have softball. We had a skills and drills basketball, of course, very small groups, distance, temperatures being taken, and all the safety precautions. We had Funky Fun art summer camp and workshops for 1st through 6th graders, very small outgoes, tennis lessons, tennis camp, ultimate frisbee, which was partially virtual, partially in person. We had some outdoor recreational basketball at Memorial Park tennis courts. We had our beautiful basketball offerings over at DeHart, which is new, which we're very excited about too. Funky Fun workshops for fall enrichment, which are going on now to supplement virtual learning for our students. For seniors, we had socially distanced outdoor caroling in the winter season. Some of our age-friendly and senior programming, we basically could only do outside for our seniors. So we couldn't do our large holiday parties and things that they've grown accustomed to, but we managed to keep them engaged all along. We had a Friendsgiving event outside, only dessert, socially distanced. Senior nutrition classes were available over Zoom. We transitioned all of our senior fitness to Zoom, and I'm really proud of our seniors because what was a rough go of it in the beginning with logons and getting them active on Zoom, they're now pretty much experts at it. And we do, every day we have different fitness offers. That way we did diabetes workshops. We had wreath making class in person, guided art class, very limited size in person, healthy bones. We're even doing, last week we had one too, Zoom bingo. So they're playing bingo on Zoom, and then we have somebody deliver their prizes because of course that's the big part of bingo is winning. We had an outdoor food truck event, and we've been doing some shopping for senior citizens, especially at the beginning of COVID when everybody was safe at home. We have a lot of plans for 2021 as well, which we're learning is seeming like a lot like 2020. So we already have a template, and we know different ways we can enhance those. So for 2021, we're looking for some sensory-friendly music and movement classes, walking programs across all age levels. Gardening is something we're looking to get into across age levels. We're working on a hula hoop clinic because, hula hoops help you keep socially distanced for sure. We're doing a virtual egg hunt again, Pride Tree in June for Pride Month. Some makeup workshops in person enrichment classes. We are working with the reservation on their ferry trail and setting up an art council to try to get people again outside. Some teen art workshops. As far as our age-friendly offerings, they're really looking for more lunch brunch meetups. So those will be socially distanced, no buffets, no sharing of food yet. Drawing and sketching classes, mandala workshop, walking programs. A senior summer camp is something we're thinking through for just a couple of weeks. Outdoor trips are looking like they might be available in really small outgoes in the summer. Coming out of this conference we were at, we're learning other towns are starting May or June, just one person per bus seats. So hopefully we can work that out. And, everybody's looking to get back to the theater, which we normally do a lot of, but we don't have any pending date for theater trips available. The venues are still, of course, not open. Pivoting to the arts and culture, they had a lot of accomplishments as well. We have a SOMA Arts Registry with 200 local artists in it, and that was really well received by our arts organizations. We were able, I think the highlight of summer was for a lot of people, the summer outdoor music offerings that we had, which were gazebo concert, socially distant, and we had outside at the farmers market music and outside in the village. We had music available there too. We had a photo contest And our winning photographer was 11 years old. So that was going multi-generation as well. Opera Under the Stars through video streaming was something that was popular. And we've been utilizing the 1978 windows to feature cultural, community, and art projects just from the outside. Because as we all know, the 1978 is very small footprint, so that's not open to the public. So our arts and culture directors and really getting the community involved, and that's become someplace you can go outside and check out our new offerings for Black History Month. Women's History Month is coming. In person, we've had groups of 6 to 10 taking percussion, hip hop, ukulele, children's music, and other in-person socially distant offerings. So where we used to have maybe 20 kids in a class, we now just have 6 to 8. Of course, everybody's mask temperatures being taken, but rather than have everybody at home and unengaged, we're getting them out as much as possible. And we're really hearing from the community that screen time has become stale, so we're looking to get people outside, get some fresh air. And of course, at the pool, we offered time slots, social distance ambassadors, and other things there to get people some kind of a semblance of summer. So some things we're looking forward to community-wide are definitely bringing back outdoor movies in Memorial Park, which is some of the things we're incorporating used to happen here, and super excited about that. We can have DJ dance party, socially distant, the gazebo concert. The gazebo became a great spot to be able to spread out and enjoy music. Some of our arts events will be outside. We did get a tent, which is going to really extend our indoor space. And we're looking to just keep everybody active and after school, after their virtual school, before everybody is totally sick of the Zoom and ready to get in person. And as more people get vaccinated, hopefully we'll see more people able to engage.
Thank you, Ms. Mancuso.
You're welcome.
Does anyone have any questions for Ms. Mancuso in relation to her narrative?
No questions, but thanks, Missy, for all your hard work in keeping the programs going and pivoting so well this past year.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll go ahead now and look at your operating expenses. So let's take a look. Share my screen. All right. So as previously mentioned, we gray out or the salary and wages because we don't discuss that in open. But is there any questions from my colleagues? I yield the floor regarding operating expenses.
Sorry, had to unmute. Yeah, I just some of the discrepancies are some of the ones that you have highlighted, Mayor, are the same as mine with regard to changes. But if we could focus on the bottom three of 201, 202, 203, I'm sorry, 375, 201, and so forth. Just to kind of explain those lines, and because they kind of go all over the place historically, and I don't know if things were changed as to what went, what was categorized there or appropriated there. So maybe Mr. Kaloje could explain.
My apologies. I'm looking to bring it up on my spreadsheet because it looks a little dim here.
Yeah, if you could.
Yeah, I think it's the same amount. It's just a reconfiguration of where the monies typically get used to make more sense of how they're coming out of the budget. Where before it was all lumped together. We're learning that, especially with our new arts and culture director, we're marketing a lot more and promoting things and adding on to the programming. So we were just making it look more like how the monies fall out and we're using them. It's the there wasn't an increase per se, but before we had a whole lot in the facility itself, the building, and engineering's working hard towards the, the building and the upgrades there. And really, when it comes down to it, we're now paying instructors, we're printing things for these front windows of the 1978. And so we just made it look more like how it's expended than like the one bucket of arts and culture.
Mhm. That's what I figured. That's what I figured, but it'd be nice to know if all those things were in one thing before. It'd be nice to know, because it's hard to see, are we going up? Are we going down? Is it on point? Because that's sort of our job here as we go through operating budgets, to kind of go line by line. And it's hard to go line by line on this group.
I see what you mean. Joe, it stayed the exact same, right? I'm not sure if anything got tweaked from what I heard.
No, if we're talking cultural affairs, that's pretty much stayed flat for the last 3 years. You're not seeing any significant movement up or down, and the new lines were designed to be able to better track what we're actually spending money on. But if we add those 3 lines up, they'll equal the one big pot that it used to be in.
Okay, that's what I was asking. Okay. And then the same ones that Mayor has highlighted there in red are the ones that I wondered about too, with regard to the differences year to year.
Yeah, definitely the 214 account, the leagues. We didn't do basketball. We withdrew from our wrestling league because that just didn't seem like it could happen safely, and we didn't have indoor facilities.
So sorry, I was just going to say while you're on that. So for this year, because COVID is still having an impact on what we could do, probably at least through, to June or sometime in there, right? So I guess if we should maybe look at that a little more closely as to, do we need 7,000 in there, or should we cut that back? Because that's what we planned for a full year of leagues in, years past and now. So since we already know we're not going to have a full year of leagues, I think we should adjust that to reflect it.
I will say that it's almost all basketball, which is a winter sport. So, I mean, hopefully our facilities are up and running for basketball. That's mostly a fall sport. So we don't have any summer leagues other than swim, which seems to be a question mark right now, but they're trying to patchwork something together. So we're hoping the league play occurs, because if we have a facility, some basketball leagues, we just couldn't participate because we didn't have a gym.
Right. Yeah, I get that. I'm just saying, and it's not just here, but all through the budget, we need to, I feel like we're budgeting as if it's going to be a normal year, and we're not accounting for some of the revenue drops, but yet here we are. We already know it's not going to be another normal year. So I feel like we're still budgeting as if it's going to be a normal non-COVID year. And it's just something I'd like to have addressed overall by administration and finance.
I agree with Ms. Adams on that point. I think we took a $1.5 million hit in revenue in 2020. And, as we said before in Ms. Davenport's narrative, COVID is not going anywhere. It's going to be here for the next 3 quarters. So that's basically, into September. So knowing that, and hearing you, Ms. Mancuso, respectfully, in terms of the winter basketball being a bulk of that fee for that line item, but, other factors too, like, when we did our kids program this past summer, which was a great accomplishment, but I looked at that variance of supplies and said, all right, we budgeted 35, we spent 11, and likely we'll have to do a very similar type of camp this year, theoretically. So there's a variance of 25K, is that too high year over year? Do we reduce that, by a certain number? So the work that we have to do as a township committee with Mr. Kaloje and Mr. Schuster and Mr. Jimes is just be thoughtful and still take into consideration COVID. Now, we do understand that if we cut too drastically, that year over year, 21 and 22 could present us with some challenges per how things are designed from a financial and statute perspective. But also, we still got to get through 2021. So yeah, I think Ms. Adams is right. Just taking a look at some things where we look like we might have budgeted a little bit, like business as usual, and take a deeper look at that.
Yeah, Mayor, we can go ahead and take a look at the budget and put together a list of things that we think could be cut back for 2021 because of COVID. But as you said, just keep in mind when doing that, you're putting a hole in the budget, which you're likely going to have to fill in 2022. So as long as you're cognizant of that problem that you're pushing out to next year, we'll go ahead and give you some thoughts on those potential cuts for 21.
No, appreciate that. I think we should at least look at it. I know it's like, short-term, long-term, and trying to find that balance. But revenue being down 1.5 million because of a big part of it is not being able to run some of the great programs that Ms. Mancuso and her team have. But we're already, we're very closely creeping into Q2 already, and it feels like the year is flying, and and we're still in the same position we are theoretically today that we were months ago. The Woodland is is not generating the revenue, the Burdorf, all our facilities that we're traditionally generating revenue from. So just appreciate that. I think that's a good exercise, an exercise worth taking.
Mr. Mayor, if I can just jump in.
Please.
Thank you. Yeah, and maybe this has already been said, but it hasn't been said in exactly this way, but I just want to make sure that my position on this is clear, and I don't think it's inconsistent with what others want. It's not that I want to put us in a hole so that we're spending money this year that we didn't budget for, that we somehow have to crawl out of next year. What I want to do is I want to be realistic about what are we actually going to spend this year. So even if that means reducing something and knowing that next, if we're only going to spend 10,000 this year, but we usually spend 25,000, I want to bring it down to 10,000 for this year. And, we know that we'll put it back up to 25,000 next year, and I'm okay with that. And next year, when someone else is sitting in my seat, the rest of you can explain to them, why it is that we're jumping from 25,000 from 10,000. But I think, what I'm looking to do, and I think what my colleagues are requesting, is not that we underestimate what we're going to spend this year, to sort of balance the budget, but that we realistically estimate what are we actually going to end up spending this year, because it's going to be a difficult, really difficult budget year this year. And, we're going to be looking at, a significant tax increase, however you want to define significant for our residents. And what I don't want to do is appropriate a bunch of money that realistically we already know we're not going to need, and to go out and tax people for money we know we're not going to spend this year. Just for the sake of being consistent year to year in terms of appropriation. So I think that's what I want to see, and I think that's what my colleagues want to see, just to be clear. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Limbrick. I think that's a fair point and a good point. Mr. Kaloje, I don't know if you wanted to also speak on, I mentioned, the year-over-year situation, just for everyone to know.
I think Biggs had his hand up for a long time.
Oh, I apologize. I did not see his hand up. Thank you, Nancy.
Yeah, I just want to know, should we just blurt out, or you want us to do hands?
Well, I have so many screens open, so I apologize.
So I want to push back on what Mr. Schuster said and what Mr. Kaloje said last time about the impact on next year's budget. I think in general, if you bring in 100% of revenue and you only budget 75% on the expenses, you're building a hole for next year. But that's not the case here. If you look at even in the area of salary and wages, which you screened out, we're going from an appropriation of 825 to 861. Yet in the actual, we're only spent under $700,000. And the same thing in OE. Yet on the revenue side, which we're not looking at here, if you look at 230, line 230-000, we're estimating 431,000 for 2021. Yet in 2020, we estimated 567. So on the expense side, we're maintaining things at 100% or even more. And on the income side, we're reducing stuff by, here in this instance, 24% than what we budgeted last year. Not what we spent, but what we budgeted. So I think if we are anticipating less revenue, we have to anticipate less expenses. And that doesn't hurt us for next year.
Thank you, Mr.
Completely agree. Completely agree.
And I do have a question just on the revenue here. Thank you for putting it up. It looks like the request, or I don't know, it says actual permitted. I'm not sure what that means. Could someone explain why we say actual 321 and then it goes to permitted 431?
Sure. So from a revenue perspective, in the state of New Jersey, by statute, you cannot budget more than you collected in the prior year.
Okay.
There are exceptions. We changed our fee structure. We plan on charging more, et cetera, et cetera. We would then petition down to the state, and the director would give us permission to use the higher number because we justified it with new fees.
Okay.
Because of the pandemic, and the TC had adopted back in November, and we executed the ordinance and the resolutions in December, we took advantage of Chapter 74, which was the law that they adopted back in August, that allowed us to take the last 3 years average of what we brought in as revenue and plug that in as a revenue number. So the two columns that you're looking at are, if we did not move forward with the Chapter 74 and the ability to borrow money in order to fill the revenue gap, which we would then have to pay back over the course of 5 years, we would really be looking at only being able to budget, $320,000 for recreation fees instead of 431. The purpose behind the law was to prevent municipalities from having to make draconian cuts in order to balance their budget going into 21, and the law extends out through 21, so this will be in place also for 22.
Thank you. So this is the point here. So even using that averaging, we get 431. That's a 24% decrease over the 2020 anticipated. Yet if you look at the expense side, we're actually going up in expenses next year. So we should be in line. If we're cutting the income by 24%, we should be cutting the expenses by 24% or somewhat comparable.
Recognizing, however, that and look, I agree with the strategy strictly from a CFO perspective, but based on those decisions, what we are saying, because once we adopt our budget, this is what we're locked into. We can't overspend our budget. So we are basically saying that we are reducing services in this particular department for this particular amount. And so if come July, the pandemic restrictions are off and we can now fill rooms with 500 people, we will be in a position where we can only go with 25% of whatever the capacity is, because that's what we budgeted for. So that's the hard decisions that the TC is going to need to make, because I completely agree with you, committeeman. The decisions here are, and believe me, CFO's mantras are reoccurring revenues and reoccurring expenses need to equal each other. Otherwise you get yourself into trouble. So I completely respect what you're saying, and I would wholeheartedly support it. But we need to also recognize that making that decision is going to now restrict the amount of services that we're able to provide, because the budget's going to say we can only spend $400,000 worth of recreation expenditures, which is like, it's going to be easy if we know that the pandemic is going to stretch on to October. It's not going to be so easy if suddenly things come to life in July and we're limited in the program that we're able to offer people. And that's the hard decision that everyone needs to make.
There certainly are cuts between now and July that we can take a look at. And that's where we can go. We can rely on the expertise and the professionalism of the department to really plot out month by month what isn't being spent.
And I agree with that. And I think that's the narrative that we're saying is that, going back to, the expenses here, and I was using the kids camp as an example, before Mr. Luke was talking about the revenue side, like, we, in a COVID world, we spent, only 11K, and yet we're saying 35. We need to cut this, basically, right? We need to cut it. And, I know these are our preliminary initial conversations, but I think all of us collectively are saying that we cannot have expenses that align almost flat year over year, because it's not going to be the case. And we have to take that risk, if you want to call it that, of assuming that we're going to be in COVID, like I said, through Q3. So that's into September. Into September is Q3. So vaccinations are coming, no question. But also, if we happen to get caught in a situation theoretically where there is a turn, and and everyone's all vaccinated by July, and we're actually reopening in Q3, then we just have to have a strategy that we're ramping back up to full services, and we won't be able to provide services over that transition period, which is going to keep us, financially sound.
Well, to that point, Mayor, I'd like to ask Mr. Kaloje. So you theorize that, say, we don't budget for it and everything comes back up in July, and we can do programs or we can rent out. Doesn't our revenue also suddenly go up in July if we start being able to do programs that require fees, like renting out the woodland and those kinds of things that would also go up? So what happens when we're able to collect more revenue because we're able to put 500 people in a room? So what happens then?
Give me 1 second, committee woman, to answer that question, because the other thing that I want to point out, and I jotted it down as a homework assignment for myself, is some of those recreation expenses that we were looking at were CARES reimbursed. So I'm going to need to go back and take a look. Even though we're showing that we only paid $10,500 for kid camp supplies, that may very well be because CARES reimbursed us for 20,000 of it. So we're going to need to go back and take a look just to make sure that these numbers are valid in terms of municipal, but they may not be valid in terms of overall expenditure. To get back to your question, Ms. Adams, the budget would restrict us, even though the revenues have increased through fees, the budget would restrict us from spending any of the additional funding. What would be required of us is that we would need to pass an emergency appropriation resolution that would need to be done by a supermajority of the Township Committee. And essentially that resolution would say that we promise or guarantee that we will raise those funds in full in the following year. So in theory, the revenue that we're bringing in would help offset towards 2022. But if it didn't, we would be obligated, based on that emergency appropriation resolution, to raise the taxes by the amount of money that we said we needed to additionally spend in 2021.
And just thank you, Mr. Kaloje, and thank you, Ms. Adams. And just also, I think it was good that Vic brought up the revenue, but that's one reason why we're having that third meeting next Saturday, because it's all about capital, all about revenues. And so we are going to spend all morning, really having this conversation about, revenues and expenses and capital as well, so that we can really have a deeper dive and understand, what we're looking at from a revenue perspective. So as we continue to go through the operating expenses, and as already been noted, keeping a mindful eye on variances year over year, as well as recommendations from Mr. Schuster and Mr. Chimes, knowing that when we go back and look at the revenue and do a deeper dive there in the capital, trying to make sure it aligns correctly. So yeah, if you could do that exercise, Mr. Kaloje, I think that was a very good call out regarding, we're looking at it. I mean, I looked at it, all my colleagues, we looked at it, we see that discrepancy, or that variance rather, of that 25K. And you're right, if that was CARES money, then maybe it's not indicative of what really happened there. Any additional questions regarding operating expenses from Ms. Mancuso?
Sorry, Missy, about that. We kind of, it wasn't on recreation. It was more of it. We kind of went into it overall. I don't want you to think we were attacking
no,
the
that's okay.
recreation budget.
No, that's okay.
I do have one question on the woodland. We are looking at changing some of the fees there. I did have a question about the third floor, because I understood when we renovated that building that there were, what, I don't know, there's 4 rooms or so up there. The art group is taking 1 room, and there was a small area there which we thought could be a multi-purpose room, like if the strollers needed to do a reading, or so. I just want to make sure that's still a possibility, because I think I don't want the art program to be embedded in that whole 3rd floor, because that wasn't the original plan.
Right, no, I think we were calling it Studio A and B with the pocket door, which was still the vision of it. Over the summer, the art camp, we take about 40 kids all on the 3rd floor. But with the COVID, we were doing groups of 10, spreading them out amongst all the floors. So we could still have 30 kids in there, which it's already sold out for this summer. So yeah, we definitely are planning on having that space. I think we were saying poetry readings, smaller gatherings, internal and local arts community things, not so much rental, but programming and things like that for the community.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, so before we move on to your capital, Ms. Mancuso, I thought it'd be nice to just do a quick shout out to one of our people watching or here tonight. And that's Joan. So she's always very much, she's part of your narrative, and she's watching. I thought she should see that she's not only a big part of our township, but even in your narrative. So there you are, Joan.
Oh, I love it. That's Miss Crystal safely giving Michelle money to pick up groceries with her grabbing tool in the beginning of COVID. I love this picture.
Perfect. So Ms. Crystal is officially in the record. So thank you. All right, let's move on to capital expenses. I'm going to share my screen, one of my screens here.
Mr. Mayor, can I just answer a question that came in while we're here on operating?
Sure, go ahead, Mr. Daffis.
Someone asked, why is Soma Two Towns for All Ages at 0 budget? And that's because the initiative is funded through 2021 by the Grata Fund. It is the last year that we have that funding by the Grata Fund, and we will spend 2021 figuring out how the township of Maplewood and South Orange will fund it going forward. So that answers that question. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Daffis. All right, I will now go ahead and share my screen. Number 3. And sharing now. And here we go. So Ms. Mancuso, you'd like to walk us through your 2 capital requests, which both relate to the pool.
Yes, they're both related to the pool. The first is up-to-date security cameras at the pool. We have a very, very antiquated system there right now, and we've had to review a lot of tape, which has been, I think, for the police virtually impossible. So in working with the chief and working with the DPW buildings team, we got quotes on security cameras that would be actually useful about trespassers and anybody coming during closed pool hours, which of course is a safety concern as we have bodies of water there. I always think about the safety first. So this is just to get things basically up to speed or have any kind of usable footage, which involved new cameras and some lights that, would turn on for not exactly night vision cameras, but it would have usable video footage from the nighttime hours.
Thank you. Any questions related to this capital request?
Mr. Mayor, it's not on this capital request, but I know we're going to review these 2 capital requests, but I think, and I don't know whether whether we'd be covering under OSTF, but I think there's some recreation-related open space trust fund capital requests. And while we have the benefit of Ms. Mancuso being here, we may want to give her an opportunity to speak on any of those she wants to. And, because I don't know if she's coming back for OSTF. So we may want to, if that wasn't already in the plan, we may want to give her a chance to address those and also ask questions, because she's really the person who has been leading some of those.
Good point, Mr. Lundberg. I think this is the right one in this graph here. And
yeah, that was definitely the one I was thinking of. And if there's any others, I would just want to, I just would want to have the benefit of her presence and ability to answer our questions, because I think the Open Space Trust Fund folks that come later, maybe haven't done the legwork that Missy has done on some of this.
Agreed. Ms. Mancuso, seeing no questions regarding the security cams, let's pivot to Mr. Lundberg's point.
Mayor, can I ask one quick question on the security camera, if you don't mind?
Sure, that Mr. Dimes, absolutely.
Is this vendor that was being proposed decided on, and is that vendor consistent with any other security cameras at the police station are currently operating, just for continuity purposes?
At the time, the building foreman was looking for a lot of cameras, like township wide. So we just had that vendor check it out. I could ask the chief. I know he was working with a DPW foreman that they were having all the buildings scoped out. So I'm not sure if those projects are still happening, but I know I said that the pool camera was a definite need based on last season.
Okay, because sometimes it's just, if you're using a camera system, it's better to have one vendor than 3 different vendors for various locations throughout the town. So just something to keep an eye on or to consider.
Yep, good point, Mr. Giles, absolutely. And maybe some cost savings as well. All right, any additional questions in regards to this capital request? Okay, going on, so I've gone. All right, hearing none, I'm going to go back to the Open Space Trust Fund capital requests. And Ms. Mancuso, you can give us a little bit of a narrative regarding this request. It would be greatly appreciated.
Okay, perfect. This request is for a spray ground at Maple Crest Park in the existing footprint of the tennis courts that are not operational right now. So we did, through the Rec Advisory Committee, we did a community-wide survey trying to gauge a bunch of different options, what people might like to see in the space, and kind of concentrate our efforts on if there was a clear winner per se of that survey. So a spray ground, the survey results showed the spray grounds being the clear winner. So we wanted to concentrate our efforts on making that happen. We've held 2 community-wide forums where they discussed, we discussed both the spray ground option and other things at the park. I just want to be clear, and we've also met with Open Space. So Open Space has seen the survey. They've seen the different concept plans of the spray ground. And again, it's not a huge amusement park type space and footprint. So eventually other things could be added in the same space. So we're trying to make it multi-generational, multi-use. We got a lot of great feedback from the community about other things either lacking in the park or things we can work towards to make everybody enjoy the space there. So this is just for the spray ground piece of it, which is about the size of one of the tennis courts. It's a flow-through technology, so it's not chlorinated, and there's already water out there at that space. People might remember that from many years ago. So the water exists, and it would be extracting of the asphalt there and adding in all of these fun, handicap accessible, and it would be a really inclusive, free option for people to enjoy the summertime. So in conjunction with the playground there, we have the lunch program there, and this would be an opportunity, again, not a lot of staffing needed. It's not a lifeguarded type thing. It's more of a pass-through spray ground and spray zone that would be a great spot for a free activity in the summertime.
Free to all. Any questions for Ms. Mancuso regarding this Open Space Trust Fund request that we'll be hearing later on today? Mr. Davis.
Another question, Mayor. I just want to add, and we're going to hear more about this during Open Space Trust Fund's presentation, but just for context on that number, that 300K, which as Ms. Mancuso and Mr. Lembrick mentioned, Ms. Mancuso has done a lot of work and research into this. That is what we think is all in, that 300K, but it's not actually 300K because Open Space Trust Fund had put in 160K last year, as you recall, into Maple Crest Park improvements before we did the surveys and before it was determined that the spray ground was going to be the concept that we embrace. So they added another 140 in there for this year, which brings us to the 300K, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Daffis. Mr. DeLuca had a question as well.
Yeah, a couple of questions. Could you just, Ms. Mancuso, could you just say again, what's going to happen? There's 3 tennis courts there now. Is there going to be 1 tennis court left and then the 2 are going to be taken away?
No, the tennis courts, that whole pad area would be extracted. I think there's a lot of ideas coming out of the community about pickleball or just green space. So I was thinking more of the phased approach like we do with a lot of our parks. So maybe based on community need, phase 2 would be pickleball there or seating areas. I love the idea, which is inexpensive, of Pollinator Gardens that came out through some of our forums. So this, it's just not using the whole space, because you see some of these spray grounds that are huge, like being at Dorney Park or something. So I just wanted to clarify this is about 70 by 40. So enough water features, to enjoy and just for a part of your day. It's not like we're going to have guests staying all day for this size of a splash pad. And there's going to be multiple uses able to fit in that footprint because you see how large it is.
So I guess I'm still unclear. Is there going to be a tennis court that remains?
Not initially. I mean, we're working with engineering about the stage 1 of getting everything out and then, renovating the asphalt pad for what is like one of those. But it's going to need room, to the sides for flow proof and kids running off of it, and then there'd be space all the way to the right there, and hopefully more green, green areas and gardens and.
Okay, I'm sorry, we must be disconnecting. So that whole pad is going to be ripped up, and it's going to be replaced with another piece of a smaller piece of asphalt that's going to be the spray park.
Yes, that's what the renderings right now. Before it's not.
So the answer to keeping a tennis court there is no, because there's no other space to build a tennis court again. I mean, I'm looking at the park that's on the screen. There's just no place to put a tennis court again. So, I mean, I'm just looking for an answer. I'm not looking for, it's not kind of gotcha. I just want to understand what the proposal is.
Right. I mean, I could get back to you when they give me more.
Okay.
They did come out to the site, and it does look like that first one and then a runoff area of the second one. So we were looking at demo since the third one is unplayable right now, but maybe we could look into that, because the cost associated, which I have a big analysis of that, is only putting things on the first one and demo of everything, but maybe that could be adjusted.
Okay. So just for the Township Committee's benefit, and it's just sort of a historical thing. When we were looking at tennis courts, there was a lot of questions about equity issues around tennis courts, because we were putting all of our money into Memorial Park and Walter Park. And people in the neighborhoods were saying, hey, we want a place to play tennis too. So we kind of made a policy decision that every park would have at least one tennis court. And I believe that whether it's playable or not right now, I believe that's correct, right, Ms. Mancuso? Every park has at least one tennis court?
Yes, they do.
Okay, so if we're not going to do that, I just think that needs to have a policy discussion by the Township Committee. And I would argue that there's an equity issue there. Okay, so that's one thing. So I have a question for Mr. Kaloje on the funding. Since this is a capital expense, why would we not treat this as a bondable expense and pay it off over the years with open space trust fund instead of using a big chunk of money in 1 year to pay for it completely? Since this is going to benefit people going forward, why wouldn't we do that like we do other capital expenses?
We certainly can do that. My experience here, at least with open space, is that ultimately, if we wind up fully funding through open space, it's similar to fully funding through, the capital fund's general balance. It then doesn't have any interest costs associated with paying for it.
Well, I'd like to see an analysis of that because these are huge expenses and it crowds out potentially other things.
Mhm.
We can certainly pull an analysis of what it would cost to borrow the money and stretch it out over say a 5-year period so that we wouldn't even get to the point of turning it into a bond. We would just sell a note and then reduce it or pay down the note within a 5-year period and then take a look at the interest that would be associated with that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Missy, has Paul Kittner weighed in on this project at all?
Yes, he was at the last open space meeting.
No, I mean, has he done any kind of engineering analysis, any kind of like, not being at a meeting? I'm talking about looking at it and from an engineering perspective, and we have severe drainage issues over there. So I'm asking if he looked at that.
He did look at the presentation. I'm not going to speak for him, but the drawings had drainage, and there was, I think that his questions were, if the utilities are run out there and things of that nature.
So go ahead, Mr. Davis.
Thanks, Mayor. We don't have a concept yet, right? You've done some research, but we don't really have a concept that we can run by Paul, engineering, I should say.
Yeah, I could get things to Paul. I think he had the original, he provided utility plans to the potential vendor, and then I gave those Excel sheets with the flow through rates, and he gave them different mapping just of that spot in the park, basically.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Missy.
Thank you, Mr. Daffis.
So I need clarification, and maybe this can wait till OSTF, but from Mr. Kaloje, from what Mr. Daffis said, we OSTF dedicated 140 or 160, I think, last year. And then we had a whole discussion about whether or not we wanted to redo the tennis courts or reduce it to one and stripe it for a pickleball, et cetera, et cetera. So the total cost of this project is 300. Doesn't OSTF unspent money usually come over to the next year? So this request would maybe be one, if we decide to do this, would be 140 instead of 300 or 160, whatever the number was.
So no, and that's exactly what Mr. Daffis was explaining. My predecessor had a bad habit of, at the end of the year, any unexpended funds he would cancel out and return back to unallocated expenses or the unallocated portion of open space. The problem with that is oftentimes he would do it while a project was still ongoing, and then in the following year's budget, open space would think that they had more money than they actually had, and then we would wind up overspending what we had in the trust. So what I've been doing since I've gotten here is, once there's a decision made by the TC that strikes, here's what the open space budget's going to be like, the money gets placed into the trust and it doesn't get moved out of the trust until one of two things happens. Either the project is canceled or the project is deemed complete by engineering, at which point, whatever the balance is, we would move back into unallocated. So that's why Mr. Daffis is saying that we Last year, we took $160,000 and we put it aside for this park. The request this year was for 300. We had no idea what we were going to, we had some ideas, but we weren't firm on how we were going to spend 160 last year. So in this year's open space, when we get our presentation later on today, is going to show that we're adding 140 to that, so that in that trust fund, in that section, will be allocated $300,000 for this particular park and this particular project at this point. And then if it turns out that we're not doing the project and we're going to go tennis courts, and tennis courts are only going to cost us 200, that's when we would then put a resolution in front of you to cancel out $100,000 worth of the money that's in that trust and put it back into unallocated. But right now, until someone says otherwise, if you've committed to the project in prior years, the money is sitting there waiting to be used until it's decided otherwise.
Thank you, Mr. Kaloje. And I think we're having what we'll call a hybrid community service OSTF meeting at this point, which is fine. In the narrative here, which I had on one of my other screens, it does discuss exactly what Mr. Daffis articulated. And we were going to go over this anyway, but I'm sharing at this point. But basically, you can see where the spread ground is, a reduction here per that new adjustment here, because the money was already allocated. One thing to Mr. DeLuca's point, which I noticed in the narrative, it did communicate 1/3 of the space for the tennis site. And since I think Mr. Daffis said that we haven't seen renderings, I think we should look at renderings where we do have at least one tennis court there. I agree with Mr. DeLuca, but we can discuss that more. So when we get these renderings, we should include at least one tennis court. If you're only using 1/3, then 1/3 could be a tennis court, 1/3 could be the actual facility itself, and the other third can be green space, something along those lines. We can do both. Yeah.
Yeah, and just a note, and my understanding is that pickleball can be played on like a converted tennis court. So you can have a tennis court and then you can sort of modify that court for pickleball. So, so I think we could sort of kill two birds with one stone there in theory. I mean, how that's going to work in practice, I'm not going to pretend to have any expertise on, but I think that at least in terms of providing the raw facility, we could get a 2-for-1 there.
Yeah, agreed. All right, I'm going to, if you have any more questions regarding this budget request or this open space trust fund initiative.
Mayor, if I could just jump in real quick.
Please, Mr. Kaloje, go ahead. You just muted yourself though.
There we go. If I could just jump in real quick for a second, my apologies on the muting. A back of the envelope calculation to Mr. DeLuca's question, we would be looking at roughly $12,000 worth of interest that we would have to pay if we chose not to use open space money. And we would be looking at roughly increasing the debt service and increasing the tax rate by $80,000 a year.
Noted, and thank you. Okay, we're going to move on. Starting to get a little bit behind. So let's move on to Ms. Mancuso's second capital request, which relates to pool covers. So Ms. Mancuso, you'd like to provide a narrative on this particular request.
Okay, yes, thank you. The pool covers that we are using, we've been kind of patchworking and taping and trying to get them their way over their life expectancy. So these are for the dive tank and the training pool. So it's not the main pool. I took that one out thinking we can make do with that one for a little bit longer. So as we're looking towards new filtration, we need covers just for the dive tank and the training pool. So I think they are from 2000. I looked them up. And they usually should last like 10, 15 years. So that is just replacement for those two.
Any questions for Ms. Mancuso related to the request for these pool coverings as per the narrative which has been provided to us? Hearing none and seeing no hands. Okay. Ms. Mancuso, I think we're at the point where we will conclude your hearing or your session. Is there any final remarks you'd like to make to the Township Committee?
No, I just wanted to thank everybody for sticking by, during these COVID times when some of these ideas seemed crazy. I know the idea of having children who weren't going to school in masks, running in camps, and surprisingly enough, we had kids out spending their days in masks before school and other areas, and they were the absolute best at the learning curve with the masks. So I'm just very grateful that we were able to get kids some kind of engagement with each other. And I think everybody knows how I felt about the camps this summer, seeing the kids in masks and, basically haven't seen their friends. They've been isolated for months and months, and seeing them engage even from a distance with each other and make their own signs about hand sanitizers and keep 1 cow length apart and all the cute things they did. I'm really proud of my team for helping them get back to normalcy during some really hard times. So thank you to everybody on the community services team, and thank you for you guys for being there for us.
Thank you, Ms. Mancuso, and thank you for you and your team being able to pivot and provide services during a time that was very challenging, to say the least, and that some of our seniors and our young people had opportunity to have some type of recreation activity, which was so dearly needed in 2020. So thank you. All right, we'll let you go. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, we are a little bit behind, but with good reason. Technically, we're never, we're here for the people. So we're now moving into our administration. We'll hear from, I guess we'll hear from Glenn, Greg, and Jerry at this point. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and yield over to you, Glenn, so that you can go and move forward in regards to the narrative. So I will go ahead and unshare my screen here where we are and let you take it from here.
Thank you, Greg. I'll take the lead here, I guess. Thanks, Mayor and Committee. You don't have a narrative because I have not prepared the typical narrative budget introduction because it's not been a typical year. And for the public, the Department of Administration has the responsibility of overseeing all of the day-to-day operations of the municipal organization and executing the policies implemented by the Township Committee. I came on board in Maplewood at the end of 2018, which I think in COVID years brings me to about 15 years of service. But in all seriousness, we all faced a reckoning in 2020, financial, cultural, racial, existential, and at the forefront of this solemn time is the COVID-19 pandemic that we have worked to combat for the last year and will continue to contend with for the foreseeable future. To put this crisis in the context of this budget presentation, it's been our role to ensure we provide institutional support and a safe and productive workplace for our department leadership and employees, while continuing to provide the same level of service to the community at large. Some of the accomplishments of 2020 include upgrading our IT infrastructure to support more online service delivery for our community, and at the same time enabling remote work and collaboration for our staff. We developed policies and procedures to protect one another from the exposure to COVID-19 and minimize the risk of community spread to the community at large. These precautions have unfortunately extended to the temporary closure of many of our public buildings and indoor spaces, and we hope to welcome everyone back to these community hubs soon. This prospect continues to look more hopeful as the vaccination rollout progresses. We also continued to expand and enrich our team by welcoming new leaders to several of our departments. We created the Department of Public Health and welcomed Candace Davenport as our new public health official. The department has been further fortified by hiring Anna Markarova, Shahira Morel, and Talia Jeffers. The Public Works Department was reorganized and the Township Engineer Paul Kittner promoted to the Director of DPW and Engineering, and Cesar Riccardi promoted to the Superintendent of Public Works. Additionally, Community Services continues to bring culture, fun, and community when we needed it most. We welcomed Anna De Archuleta at the helm of the Cultural Affairs Division back in July. Out of the gate, Anna demonstrated her ability to be an agent of change whose vision will continue to make Maplewood a destination for the arts. I also wanted to take a moment to thank all our employees, the governing body, and the department leadership for being agile and adept in their efforts to respond in a time of crisis. They were able to reinvent themselves in the way they do what they do without missing a beat. Our goals for 2021 for Greg and I were to act as stewards of this process and present you with a balanced and structurally sound budget under the temporary but instrumental leadership of Mr. Schuster, as we begin to welcome our new business administrator, Jerry Gimes, on March 8th. I welcome any questions you have regarding our operating budget, and note that we are recommending a discontinuation of a program upon the contract's expiration in May. At this time, I'll kick it off to Mr. Schuster and Mr. Gimes.
Yeah, thank you, Glenn. Very good summary. Just want to thank everyone for all of your efforts, both from the Township Committee and from the department heads. When I stepped in here, I believe in late November, it was obviously dealing with a lot of different issues. Everyone has come together very quickly and dealt with those issues. I think we've been able to put together some good policies, move forward some projects, put together a draft 21 budget, and accomplished quite a bit so far. You'll see in the administration budget, there's not a whole lot of changes there, but a couple that I will point out. One, as Glenn has already pointed out, the Wi-Fi pilot, which has been out there for a little bit, is recommended to be discontinued. There is just a lack of interest in that program. And so the costs are building there. Not only is there a monthly cost, but also the potential for other expenditures having to do with placement of antennas. The other notable thing I'll point out in the administration budget is you'll see a steep decline in labor council costs. One of the side effects of having most of your union contracts all expire around the same time is that you'll see a spike in labor attorney fees around that time. You're over that hump, so we felt it was appropriate to drop that. It was a significant drop. I believe it was $200,000 or $250,000. So that's the reason for that jump. There are, of course, personnel issues at various times that require labor council. So we will be tapping into that line item going forward, but that's the reason for that significant drop. And that's all I had, unless anyone had any questions for me or Glenn or Jerry.
Thank you, gentlemen. I can share my screen. I do have it open. I didn't know if Mr. Malowski wanted to, but I can share it really quick so that my colleagues, if they have any questions per your narrative, Mr. Schuster, they could to look at this.
I do have a question for Mr. Schuster regarding the Wi-Fi as you try to share your screen there. Mayor. So are there any outstanding contractual issues with the vendor? I thought we were on a 2-year contract with them. Am I incorrect in that?
My understanding is that, I'm not sure the term of the contract, but I believe it expires in May of this year. Okay. So that the timing is appropriate.
Okay. And what happens to the 6 or 10 households that have subscribed to the service after?
So the information I have is that we have 6 users currently enrolled. We have 3 that are on a waiting list for the yet to be installed second antenna. We don't have any plans for them. We can certainly reach out to them and see if there's other solutions that could be brought into play. But the next step would be to reach out to them and get their thoughts. For some of them, it may be a non-issue. For some of them, we may have to see if we can find some kind of creative solution.
I'll also add that if the construction at Seth Boyden goes on schedule, they will be without internet anyway, because that antenna will have to be removed until the roof is completed and then reinstalled. So, and I think that's going to happen in May as well. So they would still be temporarily disabled until that was put back up.
So I had planned to bring this issue into the Communications Committee discussion. And I've been waiting for Mr. Gimes to come on board before we schedule a Communications Committee meeting. So I would suggest we do that when he comes on board next month. We'll schedule a meeting. We'll talk about this program along with other communication issues and get back to the full Township Committee.
I support that approach.
I do have one question on the expenditures. last year, I believe we put in, at one point, we put in $35,000 for fireworks, 4th of July. When I was looking at this yesterday, I think we may have pulled it out last year before we finally adopted. We don't know what's happening this year, and I think we ought to consider a placeholder. Maybe put it back in, and then we can figure that out when we do a final.
Okay, so you want us to add 35,000 for fireworks?
Yeah, I just want to check with Mr. Kaloje. We did put it in, but did we take it out?
Yes, as part of our last round of cuts last year,
Okay.
we removed it
Was
because
it-
we knew we weren't going to have it.
Was it 30 or 35? Do you know?
I believe it was 35.
Okay, I would suggest, just for discussion, we put it back.
You noted that.
And I just have a general question about the administration's budget. Unless I'm missing it here, there is nothing allocated towards, and this is something, again, Mr. DeLuca and I can discuss with Mr. Jimes when he is onboarded in the communications committee. There's nothing allocated here for improvements to our network, is there? In terms of our township committee meetings, ensuring this sort of level of access to the community, even when we're able to resume in person. I know there were some upgrades made in our conference room at Town Hall, but I'm wondering, just generally speaking, about general upgrades.
So, Mr. Daffis, for a clarifying point, do you mean the ability to, I guess, have a two-way meeting in the committee room? Is that what you're kind of
In the assembly
articulating?
room, in the assembly
Yeah.
room, when we return in person, yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, that capital project last year obviously was planned before the pandemic, so it broadcasts out, not in. There is nothing currently appropriated. We do have a significant amount left in our IT capital from last year because CARES stepped in with some laptop replacements that could, and we reduced IT capital for that reason in 21. But if we wanted to return it to a more historical appropriation, we could have a discussion about planning those upgrades if that's what the committee wanted.
Okay.
Yeah, I would support Mr. Daffis on that one. I like the idea. I think we have more community engagement than watching on TV or on YouTube because people can speak remotely. And I think that's really important. Plus it allows for, you know, any township committee member who can't be there to join remotely as well. Plus staff.
Got it.
Any additional questions? Thank you, Ms. Adams. Thank you, Mr. Daffis, and thank you, Mr. DeLuca. Any additional questions regarding operating expenses for administration? All right. I had one curious question. This is highlighted here. Why was Farmers Market, like I see 1,500, why did like the actual, unless it's something, why was like a negative? I mean.
So because of COVID, we had to make changes to the operations, and CARES reimbursed a lot of those changes. So we actually made money there, if I'm correct, Joe, because we had to add porta potties because the vendors couldn't use restrooms publicly. We had to add staff that we don't typically anticipate. So that was CARES reimbursing those expenses.
Okay, thank you. Just obviously that was small number, but it was going in the wrong way. So awesome. All right. Any additional questions for?
It's going in the right way.
Yeah, well, yeah, right, exactly. Any additional questions for the three-headed crew? All right. Hearing none. Glenn, I don't think you guys had any capital, no?
There's some miscellaneous stuff that falls under us, and I just wanted to touch on the VoIP stuff because that's actually a bright spot in our budget too. Do you want me to share, or Joe, do you know what tab the phone communications are under?
You can share. I'll stop sharing.
Be under utilities.
Okay. Let me pull that up.
Yeah, no problem. You have it. Cool.
Utilities. Okay, so if you go to the utilities tab, I thought we reduced these to the new billing amounts, Joe.
I was muted again. You're looking at right now, you have on the screen the electric and the natural gas. So you got to scroll down.
Oh, there we go. Okay, yeah, so we started the conversion of changing our PRIs over to voice over IP in a lot of the departments. And this is actually just reflective of the actual savings. There's going to be more coming. There's a 60-day lapse as we cancel services. So this is appropriated to pay for that as it comes offline. And as we identify more POTS lines to reduce, but we can safely reduce that expenditure from 69.4 to 45.4. And then as the library bond construction continues, we'll identify other POTS lines, and as they get transferred over to VoIP, those will get zeroed out, and this can come down a little bit more. But that's the immediate savings for 21 so far.
Thanks. Thank you, Mr. Malowski. I will take it. Very good. Any additional questions? If not, if anyone has any final remarks, Mr. Schuster, Mr. Jimes, we'll yield the floor to you.
Quick comment, Mayor. I want to thank Greg Schuster and obviously Glenn for helping me out the last couple of weeks, keeping me on board, providing me all the appropriate information for these meetings. The transition has been smooth thus far, and I expect it to go smooth once I start next week, 2 weeks. So I think the process here overall is a very good process. I've seen nothing that would lead me to believe any significant changes would be necessary in the manner in which you produce these budgets. So, and look forward to working with everybody.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Jimes.
Just as good as the Trump-Biden transition, right?
A little better.
Yeah. A little better. Good.
But I've long conceded that I'm out of here. I never debated that fact.
Yeah. And you didn't put up roadblocks. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. So let's go ahead and move forward then to finance. That is our last hearing before break. So we're about 9 minutes behind our schedule. So Mr. Pelosi, I'll yield the floor to you.
So yes, Mayor, and I'll try and be brief so that we can get back onto schedule. Like every other department, the pandemic has created a significant challenge for us in the finance department. Probably our biggest concern was cash flow, as we saw revenues plummet, and we were concerned about tax collection, but we still had expenditures that needed to be met. And some of those expenditures wound up being increasing expenditures based on a lot of the governor's executive orders. Three highlights that I think that I would like to bring to light for the TC and the public is that early in the year before the pandemic showed up, we made recommendations to make our tax collection policies more resident friendly, and the Township Committee approved those policies. Those paid dividends. By working with our residents, we were actually able to increase the tax collection rate or the percentage over the year before when there wasn't a pandemic. We delayed our tax sale this year to probably the last available month before we would get ourselves into trouble. We did that in order to generate some additional penalty interest for the municipality. And then lastly, we've got $16 million worth of notes out there that we were able to successfully bid out, which ultimately over the years before the prior year's interest rates produced about $141,000 savings for us. In terms of goals for this year, and a lot of our goals from last year got suspended as we were scrambling to keep up with the pandemic, is that we want to explore using our P-card program as a revenue generator. There are some low-hanging fruit that, in theory, we can start producing $40,000 a year in additional revenue, which obviously would help us with holding down the tax levy. We're also exploring expanding our online payment program. Right now, it's just for taxes and sewers, but we're looking to expand that to be able to pay online for a host of other fees that we charge. And then lastly, we will be analyzing our debt structure at this point. We think that the time is ripe right now that we can do some refunding bonds and/or convert our notes into bonds and produce some interest savings for us so that in the future, it'll take some pressure off of any tax rate we need to handle our debt service. So that pretty much covers the overview of it. I'm ready to get grilled on our budget.
Who said you're going to get grilled, Mr. Kolodziej? And with that, let's grill them. No, all right. So let's go ahead and take a look at your operating expenses. I'll share my screen and we'll get started. Share. All right. I now open the floor to my colleagues for any questions they may have for Mr. Kolodziej.
I have one question. It's not so much on the expense side, but I want to understand on the revenue side, Mr. Kolodziej, I was looking at the revenue side and under the pilots, the payment in lieu of taxes, we have 3 pilots with commercial developers. And this is 2010, if you're on revenue, it's 2010, I'm sorry, 210, 102, 103, 104.
All right.
I just have a question on the process in your office. We, looking at last year's we anticipated $760,000 in pilot payments. We received, as of this information, 580,000. And could you talk about how, now this doesn't include the senior citizen, which is a housing one, but the 3 below, 102, 103, 104. Could you talk about how we bill that? Who's responsible in your office to do that? How do we keep up on that?
So we treat it similar, as per the pilot agreements, we treat it similar to taxes, and we set it up so that they are quarterly payments. We send out at the beginning of the year an estimated payment or an estimated bill for the first and second quarter. And then once we receive 2 of those 3 pilots are based on revenue. 1 of those pilots is based on the cost of the building itself.
Right.
So there are calculations that are contingent upon tax increases. There are calculations that are contingent upon tax credits, because all 3 of these pilots pay their land portion of the property taxes, and they get that credited against their pilot payments that they get billed out. And so then we'll send out a final bill. Usually we send it out by September when we have a finished or adopted budget. But this year, because of the pandemic, it went out much later. So the discrepancy you're looking at was, and these numbers were captured as of 12/31/2020. So these were just outstanding payments that haven't been received yet. But we have received all our money from all the pilots.
Okay, so and the 210-103, the urban renewal Avalon Bay, it's going down, or we anticipate it going down from 425 to, or 424 to 380, 381. And that's just a factor of what?
So it typically is a factor of finally getting their audited revenues and then making the calculation off of that. So we had estimated that they were going to have higher revenues than they actually produced for us when they provided us with their audit.
Okay, and the 210-104, the Claris, that's going up 20% again, right?
Yeah, the Claris is probably the easiest pilot to calculate. It's based on just 20% in each of the following years. So by the 5th year, they will be completely on our tax roll.
Okay. All right. So I just want to make sure that you're on top of it. Thank you very much for that. And can we just, and maybe Mr. Schuster can, I know we were negotiating with New Jersey Transit to pay a reduced rate for the Baker Street Transit lot. Can you talk about, were we successful in doing that? Is that going to go into 2021 any, because we're not getting the revenue there?
Yeah, so where we stand with that is we did notify them that we would not, that we wanted to renegotiate per the contract. Did not receive a response. I did a follow-up. They finally responded right after they sent us the bill, and I told them, well, we're not going to pay the bill until we follow up and renegotiate. So we have the bill. We are not paying it, and that's all I have for that right now.
And what did we budget for this year
I believe it's the full amount.
Correct.
Right, so-
We budgeted the full amount from the prior year, although we do not, as Mr. Schuster has pointed out, we do not have a signed contract with them.
Right, but in the, if you look at what's on the screen, 13220, we didn't actually pay the 72,000, did we?
Not this year, no.
No,
Says
not
we
this year,
did.
but last year, yes, we paid them their full amount last year.
In 2020?
In 2020.
All right, so I thought we were trying to recoup some money from 2020 also.
We may be, but Mr. Schuster said, don't pay any of these future invoices. It's possible that we didn't pay the December one. So we may be, we paid 11 out of 12 months, but for
Okay.
all intents and purposes, I believe they got all their money in 2020 and we've been holding their bills since then. So January hasn't been paid. February's just came in. We haven't paid that either.
I think we should take the position that anything that is due us in 2020, because, we had that reduction. They were the ones who closed the trains and reduced trains and everything. That should all be reduced out of our 2021 budget. We shouldn't be paying anything for over half a year.
Agreed.
And I would agree with that sentiment. I'm not sure that's how the contract was structured, though. I'd have to relook at the language to see that.
I agree with Mr. DeLuca.
Is there anything that you can do through the Municipal Managers Association to find out how other municipalities are dealing with this?
Yeah, we can put out a request and see what the.
Because
what the
I'm
response is.
sure we're not the only one that has this kind of an issue.
Which probably would explain their lack of response to us, because they're probably trying to figure out how to handle this globally. Because
Yeah,
we've been asking
well,
to talk to them, and they're not willing to even discuss it yet.
Yeah, that's typical of New Jersey Transit.
Yeah.
They just don't want to deal with it, so they just ignore it.
Well, then they're not getting the money, so eventually they'll have to deal with it.
Okay, good.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. DeLuca. Any additional questions for Mr. Kaloje at this point? All right, hearing none, we'll move on to your capital. Let's see. One request, Mr. Kaloje, correct?
Yeah, and I don't think we really need to put it up, Mayor, because as we had discussed earlier, it's a request that I've been making consistently since I've gotten here, and it's been now rolled into the global town hall list security measures. So I really don't have any. It's been taken off of my desk and placed onto someone else's.
Right, and I think probably actually this is one thing I wouldn't want to be put up anyway because of the nature of it. So understood. Okay. Any questions? Personnel, I saw none, unless I was, outside of, there's some merit stuff we want to discuss, but I didn't see any new staff requests at this point. Any questions for Mr. Kaloje before we, he's not going anywhere, but before we actually focus on other department heads? All right, hearing none. Mr. Kaloje, any final words?
No, Mayor, I think the one other goal that perhaps I neglected to mention, currently we have an interim QPA sitting in our office since November. And sometimes necessity winds up being the mother of invention, and there's been some benefits to centralizing purchasing within the finance department. That would obviously not usurp administration's ability to steer our purchasing function here in the township. However, it has helped us in terms of keeping closer tabs on some of the statutory requirements. And when the new administrator comes on board, I'd like to discuss with Jerry the idea of making this a more permanent arrangement.
Thank you, Mr. Kaloje. Okay, so that concludes finance, which puts us right back on timing, a few minutes ahead. Ms. Fritzen, I just sent you a private message. Would you be willing to go ahead and go, and then after you, we'll take our break before our Open Space Trust Fund?
Sure.
Awesome. Okay. I'll now yield the floor to Ms. Fritzen.
Okay, so thank you all. And first, I'm just going to highlight some things from my narrative, which you all received. And I think basically we start out with highlights from 2020 and some goals for 2021. So my highlights for 2020 and achievements. First thing I like to touch on is, I'll call it pandemic elections ×2. That we certainly successfully administered a primary election on Tuesday, July 7th, and a presidential general election on Tuesday, November 3rd, during a global health pandemic. And a lot of departments, Township Committee, input, OEM, to make what was a first for municipal clerks across the country, I'm sure, to have vote by mail elections and all the requirements during COVID that we had to provide safety for our resident voters. And I would say that Maplewood came through with flying colors. We definitely learned a lot from July to November, but again, through my staff, through department heads, Township Committee, OEM participants, we did a great job. And I think that the voters were all, Maplewood voters were served. My other item for an achievement is I was charged, my department, with COVID licenses in 2020. We accepted applications, we reviewed applications, we coordinated inspections for special outdoor cafe licenses, special ABC cafe licenses, businesses in township parks, sidewalk retail for businesses, and outdoor cafe heater licenses, and tent licenses. And again, coordination, and as promised, turn that around in under a week in many cases to serve our businesses, our merchants, and again, our residents. We also, although many of our activities were certainly curtailed during the pandemic, one thing I wanted to say was that the townships still realize the need for an appreciation of its employees, and that was held on September 11th, 2020, and with care and safety in mind. And it was different. We utilized 4 township buildings, and social distancing and masks, and safety was a top priority for all of our employees. But again, I think that's important that our employees were recognized for their hard work in 2020. I also wanted to just indicate that we operated a registrar's office during the global pandemic with the responsibilities under state guidelines, via Zoom, drop boxes, electronically. And again, the operations went on during 2020 for marriages, vital statistics. And again, our registrar, who works in my department, did an amazing job coordinating this. And we still had probably 150 marriage licenses issued, which is pretty much our standard. So those would be my achievements. I had more on the narrative, which you can all read. And now I'm just going to go through some goals for 2021. And our number one goal in the township clerk's office is to serve the residents of the township even as a pandemic continues, serving with remote application forms, disseminating information on the township website. Again, I feel that the township clerk's office in township clerks' offices across the state and probably the nation serve as information central to residents and the public. And I think we will continue to do a great job on that with drop boxes, telephonic communication, and providing assistance. Again, educational training for all members of the department is extremely important to me to keep the staff up to speed on what's going on in the offices of township clerks and how we can make things better during COVID. Facility coordination, continue to coordinate township event applications, which we have to follow the governor's guidelines, of course, for townwide distribution to departments and providing safe environments for any township events. Continue with the coordination and licensing of COVID-19 special orders for outdoor cafes, ABC in outdoor cafes. Again, the continuation of businesses in the park, sidewalk retail, and our inspections that we coordinate for tent inspection and heater inspections currently for our outdoor cafes. That concludes my narrative.
Thank you, Ms. Fritzen. Any questions for Ms. Fritzen regarding 2020 and 2021 narrative? Okay, hearing none, I will go ahead and share my screen and we'll look at your operating expenses, Ms. Fritzen.
While you're doing that, I couldn't get my mic open in time. I just want to convey to Ms. Fritzen and all of us how fast and critical our moves were last May when we made those resolutions. We approved those resolutions that Ms. Fritzen talked about. I was on a call with a webinar with downtown New Jersey folks, and just the conversation of how other towns were finding it difficult to navigate with their governing bodies and town halls and municipal clerks to get these things that we did up and running. And we did it very quickly. And I just want to salute the clerk's office for working with us to respond very quickly back in May when we adopted these and we got those programs out on the street really quickly.
Thank you, Mr. DeLuca. Yes, Ms. Fritzen, you and your team have been phenomenal, and we all appreciate you.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mr. DeLuca.
I'll now open the floor for questions regarding Ms. Fritzen's budget.
Mayor, first we'll do the township clerk, and then second is a separate budget that I also maintain, your budget, township committee.
Yeah. Any questions regarding the township clerk budget, which is the bottom half of our screen, going in the order which Ms. Fritzen requested? Seeing none, we will move on to the township committee budget.
Clearly too low.
Well, I'll put the fireworks in your budget then.
No.
That was good.
Nice.
We have enough fireworks. We don't even have to pay for.
That's I'm sure.
That's right.
Sure.
one big happy family. All right. So hearing none, we will now, and Ms. Fritz, I don't have any capital for you unless I missed something, correct?
That's correct. No capital this time.
Okay. All right. Well, I think at this point, we're at 11 o'clock. I'm just going to go ahead and motion that we recess. Our next person to speak is actually Open Space Trust Fund at 11:30, which is a little bit ahead of schedule. I do see Ms. Malloy is on the call. Perhaps we take a 20-minute break, and then maybe in a time, Ms. Rulowski or anyone who has her Ms. Malloy's cell number can reach out to her, and we can have her jump ahead here and have her at 11:20.
Mr. Mayor, for what it's worth, I do think Ms. Malloy was planning to have a few other people join her, so I don't know whether they're going to be able to get on in time. I think they were scheduled for, she jumped on early to sort of see some of the others, but I know she was, she had a few other colleagues who were going to be joining her, but maybe they'll be able to join earlier.
That's fair. Thank you for that, Mr. Lindbergh. All right, well, we're going to adjourn or take a recess rather, and we'll come back in 20 minutes. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Hey, Gary, how are you? You're still on mute.
Good. Now I'm good. I was scrolling to see who's on.
Did you watch any of the earlier?
Nope.
All right, they stole a little bit of your open space thunder, so I'm sure.
Does that mean it's quicker for me then?
No, I just think they had longer to think about all the questions they're going to ask you.
Oh, okay. How would it have come up earlier?
During recreation, somehow someone jumped the gun on the splash pad.
Oh, in community services. Okay. Well, I'm sure they did.
Right.
I'm sure they did. All right.
Well, the reason for that was we had Ms. Mancuso there, and she's done a lot of the research on that. So we didn't want to lose the benefit of her background.
No, it makes perfect sense.
Yep.
So
No, look, and I'm sure she appreciates not having to hang around for an extra hour and a half to start talking about it again. So
yeah, no, that all makes sense.
That
So,
was the thing.
tell you what.
If we weren't going to bring her back for OSTF, I wanted to get her thoughts while we had it.
Mhm.
Yeah, it makes sense. Perfect. So you just guide me when I get through it, and then you tell me what I still need to cover and what I don't.
No, cover the whole thing. I'm just saying that they had
Oh,
everyone had a little longer to think about what they wanted to say to you.
Oh, okay.
Hey,
Okay.
Gary,
Hey, Liz, how are you?
long time no see, buddy.
I know. Well, it's because you're not there.
Well, I'm not there now, but I'm there other times. You just
I thought you
can't come
guys
in.
had closed.
You can't come in.
Yeah, well, that's why you're not there to me. So do you guys miss the donuts?
They do. They definitely miss the donuts.
Yeah,
I miss not being fed on Saturdays.
that's the point. Yeah, and you get lunches too, right?
Yeah, no, she brings in a nice hot lunch for us. We get the pastries in the morning. It's a good setup. But I kept looking outside this morning to see someone was gonna show up at my door, but
No.
Lunch is over here. When are you coming?
Whenever you're serving.
yeah.
So you're on a break right now?
Yeah,
Yeah,
we're
they should
on a
be
break
spinning it back up.
till about 11:22.
Okay. And then
More-
are you on schedule then, or?
I think we're
Yeah.
a little ahead, aren't we? No?
We're ahead of schedule.
We're
so
ahead.
I think we're starting with you when we come
Okay,
back.
then you're a little ahead. That's perfect. Great.
Yeah.
Great.
Morning, Gary. How are you?
Morning.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back.
Morning.
Hey, good morning, Gary. How are you?
I'm good.
Good to see you. We're just going to give it a couple minutes. We said 11:22,
That's fine. That's fine.
and we'll get into it.
Welcome, Gary. Good morning. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. Thanks for being with us this morning.
Yeah. We were just talking about we all miss the donuts.
I miss the coffee crumb cake in particular. That's my
There you
favorite.
go. Hey, Liz, where did you usually get the lunch from? Liz? Never mind.
I think last year we did cornbread, didn't we?
Yes, we did.
Was good?
Excellent.
Very good.
I missed that tradition.
Sorry about that. Yeah, it was cornbread.
Good.
And unfortunately, Tara's is no longer there.
Where?
Tara's was a victim of the pandemic.
Oh. one of many. Well, one of too many, anyhow.
Mhm. We'll see what happens. Maybe next year we'll do Ami Ramen or Freetown or something. Fun. All right, let's go to get started. Welcome back, everyone. It's 11:22. We are now moving into the second half of our agenda for today, and we will hear a presentation by Gary Nelson regarding the Open Space Trust Fund. So without further ado, I will stop sharing my screen and I will yield the floor to you, Gary.
Okay, thank you. First question I have is, did everybody get the documents that were sent out probably yesterday by Glenn? Got them?
Yes.
Okay, cool. I can probably use the budget sheet to do most of the storytelling here without going to the notes, but there are some salient points in the notes that I want to go back and cover, but let's just start with the budget sheet. This is kind of the format we've used for the last few years, where we start with a balance of unallocated OSTF funds, which means it's all left over after everything else has been identified for some kind of project, and that was only 54,000 this year. The anticipated tax levy for the coming year is 386, so that gives us a total available fund of 440. And thank you for whoever put that up on the screen. Now, I made a note in the notes, and this is a little bit of a departure. Usually when we had our total available balance, then we would subtract the debt service for DeHart, but when I talked with Joe before we started this process, he had already accounted for that in giving us the balance of the unallocated funds. So clean starting balance this year was 440,000. We began a very few number of requests this year. I suspect that some of that is due to the fact that some of the requests we tend to see from year to year were in last year's requests and recommended, but weren't spent simply because the activities weren't completed this year. So assuming they may be done this year, they have the funds from last year to go ahead with that. So we had only 4 requests, although even with only 4 requests, given the budget of 440, there was no way we were going to be able to honor them all in full anyhow. So we started digging deeper, and the first thing we found is that one of the engineering requests for Maple Crest Park improvements, unspecified Maplewood Park improvements for 160,000, overlapped with the request from Missy for specifically the spray ground for 300,000. And the amounts didn't match, but that didn't matter. The fact is the idea for the Maple Crest Park improvements was essentially the same. So with Paul's permission, I withdrew his request for 160,000. So that helped a little bit, and that brought us down to only 3 requests. Still at full value, we would not have been able to do all 3 given the budget we had, but we dug a little deeper and did some deep dive into the existing funds and made that come out okay. Of the 3 requests that we had to consider, all 3 of them were either repeats of ones that had been done before or very similar to ones that had been done before and approved, or at least had been discussed in previous years. So the first 2, the one from DPW and the one from engineering, there was very little debate on these because these were truly legacy requests that we were very familiar with. The landscape design consultant and intern for Memorial Park for 22,000 is very much in line with what we had been doing for the last, I believe, 6 years with this program. And everybody very much appreciated the value that that program brings to the park. So that was a pretty easy one to approve. The engineering request for the Memorial Park Bridge repair, in this case, it's specifically for the Duck Pond Bridge. Way back a couple of years ago, we started looking at these in total. All 3 bridges, the Civic House, the Duck Pond, and the Library Bridge. That was roughly a total of 600,000, we thought. And then we agreed that it would be okay to do these 1 year at a time. And so this one, we've got the Civic House, well, financially effectively under our belt. That's been paid for with a combination of open space funds and a grant from Essex County. So this one, again, familiar in nature for Duck Pond Bridge, was easily approved. And then we came to the spray ground. This had a lot more questions from everybody simply because it's a brand new element that nobody was familiar with. It's not repair or replace or something that we had seen before. But again, the idea of doing something in Maple Crest Park to replace the tennis courts had been on the table for discussion for the last, I believe, 3 years. So Missy was kind enough to answer pretty much all the committee's questions about, how much it was really going to cost and how long it was going to take and where it was going to go and what it was going to look like. And probably most importantly, why it was easier to move forward with this is that because she did provide a strong rationale for why the community chose this over any of the other items that were continued for installment there to replace the tennis courts. There was some debate about, how robust that information was, but I think the committee was fully in support of the effort that Missy had gone to at least get input from the community for this. Our understanding is that $300,000 is a pretty good number to work with to go from start to finish on this. It looks like it might take more than one season to install it. That needs a little fine tuning, I think, between Paul and Missy. And our understanding is that it will only occupy approximately 1/3 of the area that would be available once the existing tennis courts are removed and the area resurfaced. And going back to when I said from start to finish, we believe this cost includes, and the timing that they were discussing includes getting irrigation and the proper plumbing and all that stuff and drainage in place, as well as just the fun elements. So in a nutshell, that was the discussion. On the $300,000, we were able to take $160,000 out of that request because there was still $160,000 unspent from last year's recommendation to, we had granted it as kind of seed money because it hadn't been decided which was really the project that was going to be moving forward. So that came down to 140. That allowed us to, in total, approve all three projects for recommendation, coming to a total of only 362, which was miraculously about 80 grand under the budget. And going into it, we thought we'd be at least 80 grand over the budget. So the magic of numbers. I will say on the spray ground, I'm going to take Chairman's prerogative here because I was the one that brought it up. As much as I appreciated Missy's input on the on the community survey and the town hall meetings that they held with, I think it was residents that lived around the park. I think that's all well and good. I did point out though that those preferences for which element they wanted, I believe, were done without any reference to cost.
The OSTF dedicated.
And
can we mute? Who can? I think someone needs to be muted. Glenn, I'm hearing some static. Sorry, Gary. Please continue.
That's okay. So I think I just made the point that while I think the monkey survey and the discussions were all great about what would be the most desirable element in Maple Crest Park, I don't believe costs and practicality and all those kinds of elements were heavily weighted in that discussion. And the other thing is that I believe that this year, this coming year, there will be an update. Hopefully there will be an update to at least the open space element of the master plan, if not the complete master plan for the town, So that would hopefully give us a more updated view of what the town-wide needs are beyond any one of the parks individually. And I would hope that that would further inform the placement of any elements anywhere within the parks. This one included, but obviously this one's kind of already underway. So that's the discussion. There's a few extra things in the notes, but that's basically just background for you guys.
Thank you, Gary. There's a question by Ms. Adams. Ms. Adams?
Yeah. Oh, thank you.
Hey, Betsy.
Hi, Gary. So I have what we don't see and what we typically have seen in past years is what was asked for and denied by OSTF committee. But I also don't see anything about park trees. And
It was not requested. You're seeing everything that was requested, and the one thing we took off the table was the Maple Crest engineering request. That's that we only had 3 to work with.
Oh, wow, because usually we get a lot more. So I wonder.
We do, but you might have missed that part earlier. I think a lot of the ones, what I continue to call kind of legacy requests, including trees and field maintenance, and I'm just speaking off.
Right.
They weren't spent this year because stuff wasn't either. There was either a surplus of monies from prior years, or events didn't happen. So some of the like field stuff just didn't happen.
So was typically the administration reaches out to all the department heads to remind them like in the fall. So I don't know if Mr. Schuster or Michalowski could explain whether or not that happened. It might have fallen through the cracks because of all the transitions and.
So the only one that jumps to mind is the Memorial Park plantings, which the department head did ask me to put in and is on my sheet, but I don't attend the OSTF advisory. So I would expect that the department heads would have brought it to their attention at the advisory committee.
So I think there's a couple things missing here from different departments and other organizations like the Memorial Park Conservancy, because, and Gary, you were at the meeting the other day as well with regard to, so you have the Memorial Park plantings in there, but, and the internship. So typically there's a request, a legacy request, which helps us to fund the trees, which are so desperately needed right now at Maple Crest Park in particular, as we've talked about. And I just don't see that. So I don't want that to fall off the radar. And given that there's a $75,000 surplus, so to speak, in this, I think we need to.
Yeah, point well taken. We just worked with what was
yeah, no.
As far as the conservancy, there was not a request made. I mean, the board was fully aware that there were funds available and that they were, I believe, invited like the typical round of suspects.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I think the invitations may have just fallen through the cracks this year, given all the interruption in normal.
I just want to add to that. I can't speak to the tree plantings that are traditionally requested, but in terms of field maintenance, we did make a commitment last year after repeated requests from the committee, the OSTF committee, to not add field maintenance to their requests. So that item now lives in another department. Mr. Kolodziej can further edify, or Glenn could, Mr. Michalowski.
I'll let Joe take that one because I believe it does come out of O&E now.
Yeah, it should. Yeah, so it doesn't come out of OSTF. Mr. Kolodziej?
Yes, excuse me. So last year, we pulled out park attendance from the typical legacy open space requests, and it got moved into recreation. This year, we picked up the organic field maintenance, which historically was in open space as well. I think the one point that we need to make here, having sat in on a few of these now at this point, is that open space typically would have, round numbers, $500,000 to allocate and $1 million worth of requests. And so they always had this difficult task of trying to figure out how to manage this. This is the first year where we're actually allocating less than we're going to have coming in. And so there's funding available. The mechanism for how we spend open space is once the recommendations from the committee come before the full township committee, typically we now adopt a resolution so that I know exactly how to allocate the funding within the trust. And there's no reason that we can't change during the course of the year. So if we decided we're not going to do this project and we're going to prioritize this project in August, it would just be a simple resolution saying we're canceling the project that we approved in April and we're adding this instead. So the fact that we have roughly $80,000 still available and unallocated gives the ability for the Open Space Advisory Committee to still entertain requests throughout the budget year of 2021 and make recommendations to the TC, who would then adopt a resolution to spend it. So for a change, since I've been here, we're actually in a better spot than we have been for the past couple of years.
Thank you, Mr. Kaloja. That's exactly what I was going to say. We had the 82K according to the data provided. So there is some flexibility to do trees and any initiatives as well. Yeah. Any additional questions for Mr. Nelson?
So I have a question. Sorry. Mr. Mikulowski, the Springfield Avenue Partnership submitted a request, I think through your office in December.
Correct. I have the backup for that, but at the subcommittee level, I was asked not to include it. So when we do our November meetings with the TC liaison, and
who did that? Who? Well.
So the backup's there. I can circulate it, but yeah, it was not asked to be included in the packet.
Do we do that with all the requests?
No, they should go to OSTF committee for discussion and then brought back to us like this.
Correct.
Like nobody should be making that call. Whoever submits a request for OSTF should go to the OSTF committee for discussion, and then they tell us what they chose or didn't choose. But to hear that there's only 3 requests, it's suspect.
We didn't see anything from Springfield Avenue Partnership in our subcommittee meeting, our OSTF committee meeting, if that's right, Gary? There was
we never, no. The only 4 I got from Glenn, which is the process I use, is these 4.
Right.
Could you circulate that so we can take a look at it before we make any final decisions on this?
Sure. Do you want me to bring it up on the screen for you?
No, not now.
Okay.
Vic, can you talk about what it was?
It was for Yale Corner. I don't know the amounts or all the details. That's why I want to take a look at it and understand it before we discuss it.
Thank you, Mr. DeLuca. Any additional questions for Mr. Nelson? Do we want to go through any of the 3 particular requests in more detail? We have the documents. Any questions in particular? All right, hearing none. Okay, Mr. Nelson, any final remarks before we let you go for your day?
No, thank you. Just I think the point that money left unspent or not, this is a year-long process. You know, we do the bulk of the exercise now when you're putting budgets together, but you know, tapping into open space funds is something that, you know, the possibility exists year-round, so that we don't go away right now when you assign budgets. We're available all year for consideration of projects that may come up. Usually it happens when there is a surplus to spend, but sometimes it comes up when it's not. So, okay.
Awesome. Thank you, Gary. Have a great day. We'll be speaking with you very soon, I'm sure.
Great. You too. Thanks.
All right. Moving on in our agenda, we are now going to hear from our SIDS. We will start with MVA. So do we have representation with us?
You do. Hi, everyone.
Mr. James, Mr. Johannes, perfect.
And I apologize. That was me. I thought I'd be.
Deb, we're hearing an echo on your end.
Me too. Yeah.
maybe take your
Oh,
phone away
yeah.
or something?
Or mute something that's not muted.
Is this better?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. I don't know what that was.
Can you hear me as well?
I can hear you, John.
Okay, great.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. So I guess I'll start. We are presenting a budget that's essentially the same as it was last year. We're asking for the same township contributions as we did last year, which is $1,500 for a landscaping contribution and $12,600, which pays for the cleaning service in the village. The rest of the budget is through our assessment to the merchants, and we are maintaining that budget essentially very similar to what it was last year. I think we've been in unique circumstances over the past year with COVID. And so Deb has been spending practically all of her time and additional time in terms of merchant support and activities in the village that support economic growth and vitality there. I think it's been a very difficult year for everyone. It's been very hard on us as a alliance, but what we decided at the beginning of the year is that we would refocus all of our activities to COVID-related support, and then we would try to maintain all of our other things as we had time, energy, and as long as it did not take away from the support of our COVID-related activities and support for merchants and restaurants. So I'd like to really commend Deb for working incredibly hard this year and for really carrying the torch and doing so well with all of the merchants and the restaurants. I also want to say to the Township Committee that I think the outdoor dining and the way that that's been handled in the village and the closure of the streets has worked out extremely well. And so we want to thank you for all of your support in that endeavor, because I think that's been key to maintaining what we have maintained in the village. I think looking forward, Deb's going to talk to you about what we've been doing and what we're doing looking forward. But I think as an overview, in spite of what's been going on with COVID, we do have a new building that's going up on Baker Street and continues to be built. And they have been very cooperative with the township and with the Village Alliance in terms of not having a lot of interference in terms of merchants. And we expect that that building will be completed sometime in the coming year. So there will be some very positive effects in the village from COVID. We have had some vacancies that we're concerned about, and we've been working on that. And as I know, the township has been working very hard on that as well. And I just want to kind of say publicly that the Village Alliance is committed to maintaining the three anchors that we have in the village that are really a part of the master plan. And I know the Township Committee's commitment to the village, and that includes the post office, a grocery store, and a movie theater. And while we don't know at this point when we're going to resolve what's going on with the grocery store and the movie theater, we do know that it has been actively pursued by us and by members of the Township Committee. And we are excited about the opportunities that will come out of this. And just want to let everybody know that that is still a part of our major commitment to our town. So with that as kind of a big overview, I'd like to turn it over to Deb and let her tell you about some of the things that we've been doing. And she can tell you about what we've been doing with Black History Month, Women's History Month, Girls Night Out, several activities as well. And as we come out of the pandemic, we plan to go back and work more on beautification and things like that. So we'll see some positive aspects in the village. But we felt that in the current environment, really supporting merchants through COVID-related activities and trying to help see us through the pandemic is really our first and foremost responsibility to our community. So Deb, let me let you talk a little bit about the other things that we've been doing this year and plan for next year.
All right. As you know, this year has been a total focus on supporting merchants and trying to keep business alive in town. I will say that most of the merchants had a very strong fourth quarter and holiday, so that was remarkable. We put out a bunch of promotions to bring people into town, remind them to shop online, delivery. They offer everything, and the community heard us, which is great news. So I was so nervous going into fourth quarter, and turns out that it worked. Social media played a huge role in that, and just, you know, really reminding the community to come on down and shop, and they did. So that was a very, very good way to end the year. Some were even up from last year, which was great. The year started and we were in the middle of Black History Month and then Women's History Month, and COVID hit, and then it became all about loans. And I got a great new education on, you know, loans and banking and all sorts of stuff, but I was able to help the merchants through a lot of that, sat in on tons and tons of webinars, and just really pivoted to just focus mainly on support of the merchants. Obviously our events were canceled, but through it all, we did have some Is this better? Okay.
Okay, try again.
Yeah. I don't know what that is. I'm alone and there's nothing near me. Sorry about that. I am happy to say that we did welcome a few new businesses this year. We have the Classic Man Cut and Shave, Chutzpah Kitchen, which is doing fantastic, and they're really, really great new merchants. Wolfpack Fitness and Cannabis Lady on Highland Place. So while we have suffered through a few vacancies, there are still good things happening. I know Stationers has some really, really strong interest, but every time I speak with the landlord, the property owner, she's very close to a new tenant and then something falls through. So I'm still keeping my fingers crossed on that one and working with her to, however I can, to get someone in there. It's been 3 years now, which sort of flew by. As far as this year goes, I am of the hope that we can do some of our events. I am fully planning to have Girls' Night Out, even if it has to be later in the summer. And I'm already starting in on Art Walk. Black History Month is ending tomorrow, and we've got amazing feedback on our Walk of Heroes program. And I do love that both districts do it. So it just keeps us nice and connected and cohesive. Women's History Month is up next. Thank you, Nancy Adams, has us all hopping and busy with that. So that's going to be another good month with full of events, thanks to Nancy. And also I want to thank Anna de Archuleta. She was amazing with the music series program over the summer, and she's just a dynamo and has this wonderful Windows for Women program for Women's History Month also.
And Lisa Minardi.
And Lisa Minardi, right. Pride Month, I'm meeting with my events committee. They have tons of ideas for June, so I'm meeting with them next week. The earlier, the better to start these things. We do plan on doing the music series again. It is my hope that the town will support the street closures again throughout the nice weather. People really responded well to that. And I'm going to be doing several of those similar to the holiday markets, the outside selling street fairs, closing the streets, having the merchants come out and outside vendors. That went really, really well the 2 times we did it, and I hope to keep that going. John mentioned the 104 Baker moving right along. I heard from Josh Mann the other day, and they've hit a couple of little bumps here and there, but otherwise it's going smoothly, and it hasn't been much of an interruption for the merchants, which is, you know, my biggest concern. As we emerge from this, beautification is going to be important. I want the village to emerge pretty and looking snappy. So I'm really looking forward to working with the township on the Village Center lot project, which is upcoming. That was from the DCA's visioning plan. And so that'll be a really spectacular change. And then I'm also looking to do beautifications to the parking lot entrances. And I'm in talks for a planting day in early springs to get volunteers and residents out and just spark some positivity. And that is about it. I'm going to continue my regular merchant meetings. And we also welcomed a new board member, Trinita Denuser. Two of them, and Carol Farden from Keller Williams, and they're both going to be I already feel it. They're both highly energetic, motivated, and ready to get their hands deep in the muck. So I really appreciate them coming on. And Karen Davis, who's on our board as a property owner, stepped down as treasurer, and Jim Nathanson has agreed to take over the treasurer duties. And that's it. Any questions?
Thank you, Ms. Johanna. What we're going to do now is we're going to share, I'll share my screen, which will have your budget, and we'll open up for any discussion regarding your budget, you and Mr. James from the Township Committee. So I now yield the floor to my colleagues to discuss your budget.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. As the liaison, I'm going to go first here. As the MVA liaison, you will notice, as Mr. James already spoke about, that the assessment is flat. It stays as it is. During a difficult year for our merchants and for everyone across the board, I support this. I supported it when the board voted on it, a couple months ago, heading into this budget season. I do want to bring this issue up again. And now that we have an incoming administrator, Mr. Jimes, I invite you, sir, as soon as you're onboarded, to work with Mr. Koloje, to work with our manager, Deb Yohannan, and our board president, Mr. James, in taking another look at our special improvement district. It really operates on a shoestring budget. And it is really very old school in terms of being up to par with special improvement business best practice. We did take a look at this when I first came on to the governing body. I've been the liaison now for almost into my 4th year. And I got to tell you, we have 43 properties here, many businesses, and last year, we committed to a 5% increase over the course of a 5-year period to bring us into a budget that makes a little bit more sense than the one that we have right here. We also need to talk about whether or not we should consider Main Street affiliation, downtown New Jersey. We haven't in the past. It wasn't really advantageous to do so. But we have seen during COVID that those downtowns that are so affiliated have received lots of money in relief for their businesses, including our sister town, South Orange, which in the aggregate has gotten over $100,000, which could have helped us if we got that money. So we got to think about these things. COVID is here to stay. COVID is not going away. Our budget next year and the economic fallout of this pandemic is yet to be fully realized. So I don't want to hear arguments that say we shouldn't think about this because Main Street may matter now and it may not matter down the road when we're done with COVID. We know with climate change that there are storms that are more prevalent and more reoccurring. So we really need to think about this. When we say that we support our small businesses as a township, we have to really walk that talk. We can't just say support your business by going and shopping at your local business we also have to do what we have to do. The township has and is committed to the success of our small businesses. We appropriated a lot of money toward the, expansive, exhausting downtown revitalization sidewalk project, ADA improvements, those are ongoing. The village lot reconstruction is going to be something that the township's going to pay for too. But we need our property owners whose properties are not being devalued, by the way, to also do the same. We understand the situation that we're in right now with our 2 anchors being empty, but we have to look into the future. And this is a dance. We both have to dance. We both have to move our feet, get up and dance in order to make this a success. So I really don't want to see a flat assessment next year. We really, really need to think about this. And I invite Mr. Jimes and his experience and expertise, Mr. Koloje. We need to look at this going forward. And that's all I have to say about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Daffis. Any other remarks or questions?
Mr. Mayor, I do.
All right, Ms. Adams, please.
Yeah, just quickly before I switch to my phone to go. I just wanted to say, there's a couple things. I don't disagree with what Mr. Daffis said. I think we talked about a few years back that when I was a liaison on the MVA board of incorporating a regular assessment increase each year, nominal amount, rather than having to, because they weren't doing it, and to recognize that things cost more money. And I think they had started that. I get the impression, much like the other SIDS in the state, that they're not doing that this year because of COVID and the issues that property owners have had, rather than levying, even if it's a slight amount, just even by the way it looks, not levying a bigger assessment onto them during these tough times. With regard to the Main Street, New Jersey, or National Main Street Center affiliation, the biggest hurdle for Maplewood Village anyway is the fact that the requirement by the Main Street Association is a full-time executive director. So there would have to be a major shift in that consideration. I mean, in years past, we also talked about combining the 2 SIDS, even though they're geographically not, next to each other, so that might be something that could be a hurdle that passes, but that would significantly add to the budget to have a full-time executive director, and would most likely not be helped by grants and money from Main Street. So it's a bigger look than that. Historic property wise, the village would totally, they'd have to do a inventory of the buildings and the history and all that stuff for the National Main Street Center and the Main Street, New Jersey to application, which is quite a vast application. So, and I don't know if Springfield Avenue Business District would qualify under that part. So there's a lot to look at with regard to and whether or not the DCA and Main Street, New Jersey is accepting new application rounds. So that's all I just wanted to put in for that kind of stuff.
I might, Main Street and those affiliations aside, and even me notwithstanding, remove me from the situation, I would ask that the town look at that, because it's really not a part-time job.
Well, that's something, that's something the organization needs to do. And that's not atypical of downtown management organizations to try, especially when they're small. It's a small district, to have a part-time and yet require full-time hours. We all totally know that happens, and that's unfair and not right.
Thank you, Ms. Adams, and thank you, Ms. Johnny. Does anyone else have any words, comments, questions regarding the budget that we're looking at? All right. Hearing none, we will go ahead and let Deb and John enjoy the rest of their afternoon, and we will move on to Springfield Avenue Partnership.
Thank you, everyone. Appreciate the support. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Talk to you soon. Bye now.
Bye, John.
Okay. My name is Jim Nearing. I'm the president of Springfield Avenue Partnership, currently being rebranded as SAM. I'm going to talk about what we've accomplished this year. We're going to ask Sheila Cartledge to talk about our budget, and then Nicole Wallace, our executive director, to talk about our plans for next year. So as John mentioned just previously, this has been a very challenging year for us and for all the businesses on Springfield Avenue and for the community in general. We'd like to thank the township for their support in helping facilitate some of the pivoting that our restaurants and other businesses had to do to try to stay in business in these challenging times, with being able to have a cafes on the sidewalk, and also having other events that normally wouldn't have occurred. It's been very helpful to them, and I think it's been helpful to the customers of those people as well. So we're trying to muddle through. I'd like to thank the shops themselves for being able to pivot as quickly as they did, and we think we helped a lot of them in doing that. One of the things that we did was Nicole, our executive director, continually sent all updates on any type of programs or benefits that could be derived from the state or from the federal government to assist businesses moving forward with loans, grants, etc. The Springfield Avenue Partnership provided masks for the businesses. A lot of people just didn't know what to do. We found resources for being able to purchase masks at a discount price, provided masks to those people initially who didn't have them, and did everything that we really thought we could to keep businesses open and keep them informed. We provided signage for health requirements produced by the state, and I think it was very much appreciated. The masks especially. We did do a lot of progress though. Even despite this, we were able to have 13 new businesses open on Springfield Avenue. And we have two businesses, a significant business, the Apothecarium and Premier Martial Arts, that are in the process of beginning a fit out right now. The aid we gave to our businesses resulted in a lot of them receiving some of these grants and being able to stay open. We continued our public art initiatives. We finished off two of the murals that had been begun. In February, we introduced our storefront poster tour, Walk of Heroes, to celebrate Black History Month, and that was in conjunction with the Alliance. We recognized the renewed or the importance of social media, and we increased our social media presence for not only for us, but also facilitated that for our businesses. We ran special social media campaigns, including Show Your Stuff, Soma, and Dear Sam, to encourage local shopping. We also celebrated our diverse community of merchants in the Mass Portrait series, which we presented to you guys in images on our year-end newsletter. The farmers market, we moved to Yale Corner rather, in 2020, and we featured weekly live music on some of the Saturdays, Saturdays from September through December. The market featured both local merchants and home-based artisans, along with the live music. Even was noticed by downtown New Jersey, and we won an honorable mention for the winning winter category. So I'd like to just give a quick summary by numbers, and then we'll go into the budget. 9 weeks of music at Maplewood Farmers Market, 11 weeks of shopping at the Sam Open Air Market, 13 new businesses opened, 16 storefront designs reviewed and approved by the Design Review Committee, 25 businesses decorated for garlands for the holidays, 50 pumpkins painted, 80 plus boxes of masks distributed to Springfield Avenue Partnership, and over 1,000 plus new media hits. One thing that we want to do going forward is you want to learn from this experience. I think a lot of the things that happened are really indicative of the future, as Mr. Dalit said, Dafa said rather. This is going to be with us going forward, and we just can't plan to go back to the way things used to be. We have to look at the way things are going to be in the future with COVID, and also with better business practices for our merchants. So we're going to work with our merchants to try to facilitate that. It's a tough sell with a lot of businesses, but we've got to persevere and move forward with it. So I'd like to ask Sheila to talk about the budget next. You're muted, Sheila.
Can you hear me
There you go.
now?
Yes.
Okay. I think everyone knows that, we had a tough year last year due to the pandemic, but I am happy and proud to say that the Springfield Avenue Partnership did remain stable financially. With regards to the assessment, we remained stable and the numbers did not change for us as well. And we felt that it was not necessary at this time. We couldn't do it due to the pandemic as well. But that's something for us to look at for the future in the years to come. I just want to point out that our budget, because there's a lot of unknowns with regards to fundraising. And one of our signature events, which is Mayfest, we didn't have last year, and we're not going to have it this year. But hopefully we will be back, or we can come back with the Mayfest in 2022. The other significant event that we have, which is the craft beer, which brings, of course, both of those programs, the Mayfest as well as the craft beer, brings all of our, not only the merchants together, but it brings the community together. And that's one of the events that we also did not have last year. It's kind of on the fence for this year because we still don't know exactly how it's going to ease up with the pandemic. And if so, we might be able to have that particular event later in the year. We are moving forward for this year. I think Black History Month has done tremendously, as you can see behind me. I'm getting ready for a Zoom Black History program at 2:00 this afternoon. And I think overall, from what the feedback I've heard is that the programs went well, even with the pandemic. In addition, the Windows for Women, as everyone gave accolades to Anna, I did the same. She did terrific. She has this program going, and I know that we are participating in the Women's Legacy Month program. So that will continue to bring people together, bring the community together, and bring the merchants together. The banner program was also very successful for us, as you can see on Springfield Avenue, the beautiful banners. So that's a program that we're planning to start up again for 2021. And hopefully that will also continue to bring us some additional revenue. Everything else pretty much has remained the same in the budget for 2021. I'm going to let Nicole talk about the goals and initiatives that we have for 2021. But if anyone else has any questions about the budget, please.
Thank you, Sheila. Before we move on, any questions? I have the budget. Are there any questions at this point, revenue and expenses? It's really small, so I had to make it as large as possible. Hearing none, I'll stop sharing my screen and yield to Ms. Wallace.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I just wanted to follow up on a few things that were talked about previously. First of all, thank you for now considering our open space grant application. It's a small number, but it could have a nice improvement to Yale Corner. So I appreciate you still keeping that opportunity open. And I just wanted to address the Main Street New Jersey program. They do have another application round ending March 31st. There was a 4 hours of webinar sat through in January. I will say the limitations that everyone brought up, Nancy and Deb, are true in terms of whether it's the staff or the historic buildings in the terms of Springfield Avenue. There is, I'm thinking Springfield Avenue will still make an attempt because we've changed in the sense that now we have a full-time director. We do not have the historic building part. I wonder if that works against sort of less, communities that maybe what we do have is a strong diversity in our number of merchants. So I don't know if the historic building thing is a make or break. It seems sort of like it is, but I'm going to make an attempt to apply and see how it goes. And that's due. And Deb, I can talk about this more with you if I think there's a window for MVA to apply. Just in terms of our goals and initiatives for 2021, well, a nice thing is that I've gotten a lot of interest from entrepreneurial businesses. Like, as you can imagine, there's a whole crop of people who are sort of second guessing maybe their corporate jobs or commuting back into the city when the pandemic is over and maybe wanting to follow their dreams. A lot of kind of niche food-based industry businesses are interested in Springfield Avenue, given just the traditional rents for a smaller startup business. What we're lacking a little bit is vacancy in the areas that people want to be in, mostly the area around Yale Corner, although we do have some vacancies elsewhere. So one of an early initiatives I'm going to do is just do a mass mailing to all the property owners on record, whether it goes to an LLC or someone we know, just reintroducing the SID, reminding us who we are and that we'd like to work with them, and that if they have vacancies in their building to reach out to us and we can help them make a match with a potential merchant. It's great to hear so many people reaching out to me, and it's obviously a little frustrating when I just don't have space to show them. And we do have a lot of underutilized space on the avenue, but those aren't necessarily the most accessible property owners. In one of our first casualties of COVID was a great Meet the Mayor event we were going to do with Frank. I still think that should be an in-person event. I think the whole purpose of the Meet the Mayor event is not just to meet Frank, but for our businesses to get to network with each other. And I think that's greatly diminished over Zoom. I'm sort of hoping we could do that now in the fall, or possibly even do it as an outdoor event. This is something I'll follow up with Frank. I don't think just doing it over Zoom, it ends up becoming more of a presentation Q&A. And that wasn't really the whole point. It was really supposed to have a social aspect to it and a networking aspect. And I think the FaceTime is really key to succeed. But Frank, I can follow up with you if we want to think about a modified version of it. I also do think there's a little.
As we said before, I'm ready to go. I'm just
I know you are.
shots away. I'm just two vaccination shots away.
As am I. Fancy that. Well, as Sheila said, some events, Mayfest, the idea of having a crowded Springfield Avenue in May doesn't seem like it's going to happen. In addition, our wine fundraiser in July seems a little premature. Again, these are events that are successful because of the crowds and the intensity of people all showing up and enjoying a day together. Possibly, I'm keeping the craft beer event on the calendar for October. I think, that I see a lot of organizations sort of rescheduling their flagship events, hopefully for the fall. Again, it's just a placeholder, and we hope to be able to do it. Given the current conditions, we're hoping to reintroduce our Yale Corner Market, which was started during COVID, to do some events in the spring when the weather warms up and bring back those other merchants. And then think about and also having some events, not just on Yale Corner, but maybe in one of the parking lots elsewhere on Springfield Avenue. We want to continue our community outreach. We did a nice event with SOMA for 2 towns this year. We work well with Community Affairs Department. I'm in touch with Hilton, the Neighbor Association. And another thing we'd like to reschedule that didn't happen is the Community Summit. Again, I still think these things work much better in person than as a presentation on Zoom, but it's something we could discuss if we just want to do it, or we can table that for the fall. But, you know, checking back in with our local community. And then we're just, you know, hopefully a goal is to do temporary improvements to Yale Corner, understanding it's not a property that either Sam or the township owns, but we feel like there's temporary things we can do, and really having that still be the center of events, and then reinitiating our public art program. And that's all.
Thanks, Ms. Wallace. That's not all, that's a lot. And, and kudos to you. You've hit the ground running and really have elevated our game on Springfield Avenue. So I just want to recognize your efforts, your leadership. Myself, Mr. Luca, have walked Springfield Avenue a handful of times with you, and you're engaging with all of our businesses. So thank you for all that you do. Are there any questions at this point for Nicole or Sheila or Jim regarding the budget, regarding the narrative? I'll yield the floor. Mr. DeLuca.
I just wanted to report that yesterday we had a job fair for the new Terrace and a medical marijuana facility, and 59 people showed up to meet with the Terrace End folks. So it was very successful. We had it at the Hilton branch of the library. So we brought some more people to Springfield Avenue.
Thank you, Mr. DeLuca. Yeah, we're all very excited about our upcoming ATC. So it's going to be great.
Mayor?
Ms. Adams, yes. Oh, there you are.
Yeah, sorry, I know. Thank you. Nicole, I just wanted to let you know that if you need any assistance or want to talk at all about the application for Main Street, New Jersey, just give me a call and we can arrange to, you know, if you need any assistance on it at all.
I will take advantage of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Adams. Would anyone else like to address our Springfield Avenue partnership team? All right, hearing no one. Sheila, Nicole, and Jim, thank you for your time. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon. You're welcome to stay because Deb and John have, or you can, you can move on. So, and enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Cheers, everyone. Thank you. All right, we'll now move on to the next group in our agenda, which is UthNet. I did see Ms. Malloy was here as well as, is that Sheila, who's also Ms. Malloy too? That's, but I'll now, there you are. I'll now yield the floor to Ms. Malloy so that she can provide her narrative, and then we'll go from there. Or Sheila, are you going to do it for Diane, or how is this working?
You mean Camilla? Me?
Oh, sorry, Sheila, my bad. Where is Ms. Malloy? Oh, there she is.
Hi everyone.
Good afternoon.
Hi. So, good afternoon. I would just like to start by briefly telling you about UthNet and what this past year has been like for us and where we're heading in 2021-22. Things were rolling along nicely for UthNet in January through March. Clubs were underway. Our spring session was beginning registration, and our extended enrichment program, the program that runs until 6 o'clock, was established with students at both middle schools. We've begun conversations at CHS for our chat and snack forum with plans for an April forum. When the pandemic in March hit, the schools closed and UthNet had to pivot. Not only did our extended enrichment program close, but discussions for CHS programming were on hold, and our spring club session was in jeopardy. Moving quickly and working with administration at both middle schools closely and with the help of our coordinators, we went all virtual. Because it was such a tumultuous time for the community, families, teachers, students, and everyone, we felt that offering the clubs free in the spring session would be a bit of a relief. We quickly organized all registration online and had the teachers run all activities and clubs virtually. USET still continued to pay the teachers, however. During the summer months, we planned on a virtual fall session, but organized USET so that both middle schools could opt into clubs at both schools virtually, combining the many talents of both teaching staffs at the middle school, allowing both middle schools to have access to all clubs, and creating a model where teachers work together across school lines and where students get to make new friends, build relationships with teachers, and socialize in a time of increased isolation for many. It has been very successful. It's created more choice. We offer more than 20 plus clubs each session, serving over 400 students each session as well. It's also been a place to renew interaction, building community within and between the towns and the middle schools. As time has gone on, we have seen how clubs have helped with the anxiety among the students, giving them a safe place to just be and not stress about assignments and other fears that COVID has created. Some highlights have been our Chop Like It's Hot Club, which is a cooking club, Junior Historians, Chess Club, which has provided some healthy competition, and the Coffee House Club, where students discuss topics of prejudice, social justice, sexism, loss, and other timely topics through the exploration of music. Our Spectrum Club and Real Talk Club, Messy Science, and more have all helped. Our Writing and Podcast Club has also been an interesting take on what's been going on in the world around us. The Podcast Club created a literary magazine for both middle schools, and the Podcast Club has created PSAs for students during these troubling times. We are also thinking of using this club to clarify and help educate the youth to the laws surrounding cannabis, students talking to students in the upcoming spring session. A silver lining in all of this has been we were able to capture family emails through our online registration, enabling us to more effectively reach out during our fundraising efforts. Camilla will talk a little bit about the 4 touch points in our fundraising campaign: direct mail, email to all registered, Giving Tuesday, follow-up, and Facebook fundraisers. Camilla, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay.
Hello.
Okay.
All right. So hi, everybody. I'm Camilla Finch Titleman. I'm the board chair. Yes, it was, as Diane said, a very hard year, but much to our delight, we had some advantages in it. And one of the big advantage was having to pivot to do everything online. And so because we had to pivot to virtual all the time, our signups became exclusively online. And this gave us access to a lot more emails, particularly those of the parents of our club members. And we took full advantage of this and launched a multi-tier fundraising push. First, we participated in Giving Tuesday in a much bigger way than we've been able to previously. Second, we created then a full sort of complement of a fundraising plan through email solicitations. And in the end, we were able to reach or ask these recipients actually 4 times for funding, which was very helpful. And then finally, in terms of really taking advantage of our online space in this crisis, we were able to do fundraising through Facebook, through our board members. A number of the board members had fairly successful Facebook fundraisers for the organization. And then finally, in terms of funding for us, and we were using our, regular traditional funding process, which is a letter to community members and other previous funders via parcel post. And that was also very successful. So we feel that we took advantage of a bad situation, like a lot of the other nonprofits out there, and see this push us online as a good thing, a kind of a silver lining in all the sort of crises that we've had to deal with, and everybody else.
Thanks, Camilla. Okay, so moving on to the YouthNet budget and how it's been impacted this past year. The Municipal Alliance funding stopped altogether in March, changing plans for the end of year programming, and the new funding from the Municipal Alliances for 2021 has been cut by 70% for both towns, impacting our budget. Our extended enrichment program, a source of revenues for YouthNet, only ran 4 months in 2021, September to December. So our revenue stream will be impacted. You don't have this, but there's a pie chart here. I don't know if you can see this. I'll just talk you through it and then I'll send it over to you as well. If you take a look at this, as you can see, 39% of our total revenues come from contributions, 18 from grants, and the extended enrichment program, which ran last year from January to just the end of February, was down to 11%. But all in all, 68% of our revenues came from sources other than municipal support, which I think is, worth highlighting. YouthNet has been able to successfully apply for PPP monies during the pandemic. Although it was a small award, since most of our people are independent contractors, it will still help to offset some of our expenses. Just another word about our extended enrichment program. Although it wasn't open from March to June, and will not probably open for this school year, September to June, YouthNet has kept up all reporting and licensure requirements mandated by the state during COVID. When we return in the fall, it is our hope to return in the fall, we will have to train all staff to meet the new COVID guidelines set forth by the state for after-school programs, in addition to our regular training. And we're not sure the extent of the expenses yet that will be incurred by doing this. It is not our plan to increase registration fees or the cost to parents for the extended enrichment aftercare program. We've been able to hold the cost stable for the past 4 years and plan to continue to scholarship and provide services where needed to members of our community. What's ahead? So our spring session is about to begin registration. It's our hope that we can figure out how to offer some clubs outside to alleviate some screen time for our youth, such as our 5K club, Cougar Crunch, our environmental and garden clubs, just to mention a few. We are also looking into how our internship and mentor program might take shape this summer, and we're talking to the CHS guidance department to see what we can make happen. We plan to open our extended enrichment program in September, as mentioned, with the anticipated need for an increased enrollment, given the fact that more parents will be working from home and have uncertain schedules, and they need a place for their children to remain safe and engaged after school. We will resume our conversations at CHS for the Snack and Chat forums, with hopes of offering several forums in the coming year. In sum, in 2021, YouthNet plans to act as an advocate for continued youth programming at the schools after school, and to be ready to respond to the needs of the community as we transition back to in-school learning. This is particularly important in 2021-22 school year, as our district implements its new integrated plan and as new board members join the Board of Education. YouthNet's continued and steadfast work during this transition time in our community is needed to foster continuity and support to the youth in our town and families that live here. YouthNet remains a community resource, and our community is most in need. To that end, YouthNet is asking for $15,000, same as last year. Thank you for your time and continued support. Are there any questions?
Mr. Mayor, I don't have any questions, but as liaison to YouthNet, I just wanted to say that they've really done an amazing job at pivoting and adapting over the past 12 months, and really doing the impossible, which is, reaching so many kids in so many ways, figuring out ways to get people involved, despite the fact that, for the most part, the kids were not in school, and these are after-school activities. and they haven't been able to, to get people together. So, I think that YouthNet has continued to be a great resource for the community and particularly for the young people of our community. And I just want to commend the job that Diane and Camilla and their whole team have done, and the teachers, who've, many of them have had to completely adapt to a new world as well. So, I didn't have any specific questions on the budget or the request other than to support it and recommend to my colleagues that we continue our township support of YouthNet.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, I want to add one more thing because Diane is too kind not to. When we started to pivot in March, Diane very generously gave up her salary until the end of August, which really helped us achieve being able to offer the clubs for free in the spring. So I just wanted to say publicly thank you to her.
No.
Thank you, Camille. Any other individuals, colleagues want to speak regarding YouthNet? All right, hearing none. Camille and Diane.
Thank you.
Free to go. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Good afternoon.
Appreciate your time. Thank you. And your support.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
All right, we're now at the last hearing for this afternoon, today's session rather, and we'll be hearing from the Community Coalition on Race. So I think we have, there's Ms. Gante. And did I see Ms. Corey? There's Kelly. All right, awesome. All right, so great to have you both here. And I'm going to yield the floor to you for a narrative and we'll go from there.
Thank you so much, Mayor McGeehee. It's nice to be here this morning with everyone. Thanks for the time. I am here with our board chair, Kelly Quirk, and I'm going to quickly take you through some of the programming that we did in 2020 and what we're anticipating for 2021. And Kelly's going to pop in to say a few things as well. First off, I want to thank you so much for the town committee's participation in so many of our programs this year. Not only the financial support, but the moral support, the showing up to events, our liaison with Mr. DeLuca, Dean Daffis participating in one of our events that I'm going to get to, and Mayor McGeehee, your amazing participation in our MLK event. We can't thank you enough for your presence and support. So an important part of our mission is helping people build relationships across racial and cultural barriers. And we really worried in 2020 when the pandemic hit what might be lost. But like so many nonprofits, we switched over to use virtual formats. And we found actually that we've had better attendance and a lot of post-event outreach. So we've actually been reaching more people during this time. And we found that many participants are finding the virtual spaces to be a lot easier for group discussions and in some instances, a safer space. So it has helped us in some ways, and we are all so much looking forward to being together again in person, but we know that we have new means of reaching people and new opportunities to keep growing, and we're going to keep working with that. And so just like everyone else, we had to respond to the challenging moment to work to address new realities in racism and community needs through our virtual programming. And we did this through the distribution during the pandemic of some printed resources, a lot of printed resources, over 3,000 copies of COVID-19 responses, a resource guide, and some other flyers. And we were reaching expanded audiences through new community partnerships as well. And so some of the events that we held pre-quarantine were the MLK observance and volunteer fair, the Luminary Project. Over 800 people gathered for that at CHS last year. the 16-19 year project Year of Communal Learning. We began in January. We did that in January and February. We had something scheduled in March that had to be put off once we were in quarantine. For Black History Month, we had that amazing weekend of working with progressive theater at the Bergdorf Center on the Scottsboro Boys musical. We had coffee house discussion at the Woodland in Maplewood on the myth of physical racial differences. We worked with the Soma Against Hate Collective, distributing the signs that many people are now familiar with, the purple and green signs throughout the towns. And then the pandemic hit, and that's when we produced the COVID resource guide, the flyers that were distributed to help people access food resources and housing rent and rental assistance. We also held a Luminaries in Action event in the spring to help people gather and recognize and share a moment of solidarity as we were going through such difficult times. We did not give up on our other programming. We did adjust to the virtual world pretty quickly. We were able to get a grant from New Jersey Council for the Humanities to support our conversations on race, which we held a little later than anticipated, but we did manage to do it with Jelani Cobb on white nationalism and white supremacy, an important conversation to say the least after what we have seen happen across the state and the country in the last year. We held also a Journey to Anti-Racism, Deepening Our Commitment. That was a two-part coffeehouse discussion. How could we address questions like, how can I be a better ally? What concrete actions can I take to support Black Lives Matter? And following that, our civic engagement group has been working with teams to do small group follow-ups with individuals. We had our event on food, housing, and the digital divide, as I mentioned earlier, with speakers, including Dean Daffis from the Department of Community Affairs, Superintendent Taylor and Kate Cahill of the Food Pantry at Our Lady of Sorrows, to help people to talk about progress and needs and help people access supports. We also saw the growth of our youth collective. They had a Black Lives Matter celebration honoring the street signs and also honoring their ongoing struggles as youth in our community. And that is something that we're going to see more of this year. The youth collective is growing, and we actually received a grant to support some of that work in 2021. And we also participated in the Concert of Hope with our local Y, which we were really excited about, also working with youth. We did some, we continued our unconscious bias training with the Maple. We started in person with the Maplewood Chamber of Commerce, and then we switched to serve also Savka and South Orange and Jesby House using some of the same type of training. Our residential group, our committee, worked with Maplewood's Vanessa Pollock, and we held the Racial Equity Town Hall for Realtors. Over 120 realtors attended this informative and thought-provoking session on fair housing history, unconscious bias in the real estate industry, and strategies. And this is really key for us, strategies on serving Black home seekers with productive and equitable approaches. And we are continuing that work this year. We also hosted 2 foreclosure and eviction prevention workshops. We collaborated with La Casa de Don Pedro to provide this workshop on homeowner and tenant rights and providing resources again. Our group is working on providing a better use of our loan funds, something that is more supportive, that is absolutely pro-integrative, And we feel like we're coming up with something good that's in the works. So we'll have more information on that very soon. And our marketing group, we developed our new logo. I hope you've seen it. Our website has been transformed somewhat. And our targeted marketing website is launching very soon. We have a lot of resources on that website ready to go. We just did a podcast with Brown Stoner out of Brooklyn that will be available. And our community outreach and response, we did a presentation with the Hilton Neighborhood Association, excuse me, and we are continuing to be sought by lots of groups across the country, but a lot more in New Jersey this year. And I am working with a group of not just municipal leaders, but other people looking to start up community organizations like what we do here throughout the state. And I will have more information on that as we continue to meet in 2021. And that is the review of 2020 with a few gestures toward 2021. I know you have our service proposal and our budget, and I'm going to let Kelly step in here to fill in some of our visioning for 2021.
Hi, thank you so much to the Maplewood Township Committee and for your ongoing support. I think Nancy did a good job of summing up a lot of where we've been in the last year and how we've adapted to new circumstances without having to drop levels of service, just to change them into different formats. In terms of 2021, there's a number of things that are coming through we are very happy to, as Nancy said, increase the youth collaboration in our organization. And not just that we have a youth committee, but really thinking about how the board can inform the youth and the youth can inform the board. And that is a process and journey that we are embarking on. We're continuing our focus on equity and pandemic response. This Sunday, we're hosting an event as part of Black History Month on Black Health that includes talking about COVID vaccines and the Black community, which we think is an important conversation to be had. And so we hope you could join us for that. In addition, as we continue our work, we've done a lot of fundraising over the years. And my daughter, of course, is joining us right as I'm talking. Okay, 1 second. We've been doing some ongoing multi-year investment in raising funds as a board to cover some things that were going to take several years. So we raised a lot of money to cover sort of what Nancy's referring to as targeted marketing, which is really creating a space that we can use to target in movers of color that's separate sort of from a real estate angle and also sort of separate from just the work of the coalition in terms of look and feel, right? It's really about targeting to bring people in, even though we're the ones doing the work. In addition, this year, it's 2021, we get the first load of census data, and we have an entire committee who is dedicated to taking that census data, taking other sources of data that we get across the towns, whether it's business, whether it is from the township committees, whether it's from the school district, and putting together a demographics report that really talks about equity across different lines of the community. I think that's really important to us because over the past 3 years, we've been working on initiatives where we've wanted to see growth and change in terms of access to institutions across the community. And we're hoping that this, and including demographic integration, residential integration in the schools, which we're very excited to see finally moving forward. And so the demographics report is going to be really important. And I don't want to Nancy gave a little plug forward, but our residential committee has done a lot of work, both working with realtors, but also really thinking through how we can be supportive to keep people in their homes who already live here, who might be impacted by the pandemic. and also how we can address the racial wealth gap. And so as we look at what we may be able to do with what was previously a home loan maintenance program and converting that, we're very excited to where that takes us towards our mission and goal of residential integration. In terms of fundraising, we have a board. I hope you can't actually hear what she's asking. Our board has really been dedicated to fundraising and to raising what we can in a year when it's very challenging to raise money. We've seen a lot of small donors, but small donors can grow, and we've really decided to invest in that message and mission. We did receive a PPP loan, sorry, that helped to sort of stabilize what we knew would be a loss from our annual dinner, which is our main fundraiser. We knew we were not going to be able to raise what we did. So this really did help offset that, in addition to all the grants that we have been applying for and trying to really increase that area of development. I'm going to mute myself now so Nancy can talk or you can ask questions. Sorry, guys.
I thank you, Kelly. You definitely filled in where I left off. And I neglected to announce that it is our 25th anniversary this year. And we are super excited about that. Again, you know, so many groups are reaching out to us to see what we're doing. So we're doing, to honor that anniversary this year, we're doing two things. One is meeting next week with a group of new people and founding members who are interested in helping to write the history and find creative ways of sharing our history. One small effort, well, I shouldn't say it's small, one great first effort toward that, and you can check out our website, communitycoalitiononrace.org. I just put this up yesterday that shows that what the schools committee has worked on over the last 20 plus years. The second thing that we're working on is setting up an area of our website that is a toolbox or a resource kit area so that other groups can take advantage of some of the really fabulous resources that our committees have developed over time. They're very much scattered throughout our website, and we're going to harness those, grab them, and organize them so that they are more accessible for people. And I think that is pretty much it. So I will open it up to questions and hope that Kelly comes back.
Well, Nancy and to Kelly, I know she's taking care of the little one. Thank you both for your narrative and for all the work that the CCR does. I'm going to yield the floor to my colleague, Mr. DeLuca, who is the liaison, and he may have some words.
I just want to say it's been a good year. Last year was a difficult one, but a good one. We had creative fundraising events. And one of the things is we're having a meeting of the Affordable Housing Committee with the CCR's Residents Committee to talk more about their housing initiative, see if we can help out and see how we might be some synergy there. And there's a lot of interest in the school's integration plan that's coming up. So we spoke about that the other night at our board meeting. So the CCR is on everything that's happening in town. So kudos to them.
Thank you for that.
Thank you, Mr. DeLuca. Ms. Adams, did you want to say something? I think your hand is raised.
Yeah, and I don't know how to put it down on my phone remotely, but I just want to compliment the Community Coalition on their work this year. And I just had a question as to whether or not the plan is to do sort of hybrid events in the upcoming, year or two, since you had such positive attendance to a lot of the events and expanding the footprint outside of Maplewood, South Orange, whether or not that's something that you guys are considering.
Yes. It is so great to be able to, once people start commuting again, one of the ways that we lost people was that they're, people coming in from the city or from other places, they're coming in late, they have to go home to families. We know that we gained a lot of connections with people because they could just tune in. And that's another thing. Thank you for raising this, Ms. Adams. We have an ad hoc tech committee, and we are trying to grow our and improve our tech abilities. And that will be one of the things. When we are able to be together, how can we also have people engaged virtually?
Thank you, Nancy and Nancy. Mr. Daffis has something to say.
Just quickly, I want to commend the coalition. You guys have really knocked it out of the park during a challenging year. You found new ways to engage people. You found creative new initiatives, and in particular, as you've noted, I've been involved with the residential committee before, but the new and improved residential committee under Colleen Breslin's leadership is really doing tremendous work to meet new needs in new ways. And I really want to commend you on that. I want to thank you both, Nancy and Kelly, for not using the word pivot, but rather using the word adapted. Good for you, because the new COVID word is pivot. It used to be the new normal, and we got rid of that. And lastly, thank you for letting us know that this is going to be your 25th year. You inspired me. I went online as you were presenting and became a monthly donor at the $25 level. And I encourage my colleagues to do the same, and let's start a social media campaign this afternoon to get some $25 monthly donors out there.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate that, all of you.
Thank you, Mr. Daffis. Let me take a second to give Kelly a shout out. Kelly has been an amazing leader for the CCR and an amazing community advocate. And as you can see firsthand here for those who are watching, Kelly is showing the super person that she is. And not just Kelly, so many of our moms and parents in Maplewood have been really doing a heavy lift of being a volunteer, a leader, a mom, a parent, and doing so many things during COVID. So you're a superstar, and just want to give you a shout out and for all the work that you do. So yeah. So I want to thank both Kelly and Nancy for their time. Unless there's any more questions, I think we're all very proud of the work that you do. I remember being a liaison, years ago, and enjoyed my tenure there, as Mr. Daffis did and Mr. DeLuca does now. So if there's any other questions, if not, we will let Kelly and Nancy enjoy the rest of their afternoon. All right. Take care. Have a great day.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, Nora.
So we are at adjournment here. We are 5 minutes from 1, so we're right on time. What I want to communicate before we finish to adjourn is that we now have a public comment. So Glenn, do we have anyone who would like to address the Township Committee?
Going once, going twice. If anyone in the audience wants to use the raise hand function, but I think that's just Nancy. I'll ask her to unmute just in case.
Yes. I don't know how to get my hand down on the phone. Sorry.
They'll take that as a no. Okay, cool. Awesome. Okay. All right, then we will close our public comment. Just like to let the public know that our third and final budget session will be next Saturday morning. Whereas mentioned earlier in today's session, we'll be focusing on capital. We'll be focusing on revenues. We've already started the preliminary conversation today. And then we'll do a second review of what I'm calling highlight operating expenses and a recap. Are we starting at 9 or 9:30, Glenn? I can't remember.
I believe Mr. Schuster is coaching that day, so we're starting at 9:30. Unless he can come late if you want to start earlier.
I guess we'll leave it at 9 for 9:30 rather, and then we'll go for a good 3 hours or until we retire. So everyone, thank you for your time today, and we'll speak with you soon. I will take a motion to adjourn.
Move we adjourn.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you.
Enjoy your weekend.